Chapter 1069. Song Qingshu actually had an even simpler way to interrogate Li Qingluo, which was to use the soul-shifting technique. He was sure Li Qingluo would tell him everything she knew. The main reason why he had gone into so much trouble, using various methods of coercion and temptation, was because he did not want to expose his trump card. After all, as the White Lotus Mother, Li Qingluo's knowledge was incomparable to regular people. It would be very difficult to fool her after he used the soul-shifting technique on her, and Song Qingshu was not the kind of person who would ruthlessly destroy a beauty. He would not do something like silence her. Coupled with the fact that Song Qingshu had watched many movies and dramas about special abilities in his past life, he knew that even special abilities that could directly read minds had corresponding methods of nullifying them. If everyone found out that he knew the soul-shifting technique, they would be prepared, and the effects of the soul-shifting technique would probably decrease drastically. Just like how water could carry a boat, it could also capsize it. Song Qingshu was worried about relying too much on the soul-shifting technique, which would lead to him falling for it in the future. As a result, unless he had no other choice, Song Qingshu would never use it. However, he had never expected Li Qingluo to tell him something so shocking. He almost could not help but use the soul-shifting technique to verify the truth. "Yu Fei is your uncle?" Song Qingshu's expression was extremely strange. In his past life, Yu Fei could be described as a great hero that everyone revered. He felt so unreachable and sacred. Now that he learned that he was Li Qingluo's uncle, he immediately felt like he had become a little more worldly. Song Qingshu had become much closer to him. Li Qingluo nodded, and a sliver of reminiscence appeared on her face. That's right. When the Genes invaded South, Uncle joined the army resolutely. Who knew that before long, his hometown would be occupied by the Genes? In the face of danger, Uncle's first wife, the Lu matriarch, abandoned her mother-in-law and young son, remarrying twice before marrying an officer under Han Shizhong's command in the end. This matter broke my uncle's heart. Later, he stayed away from women and refused countless princes and ministers in the court to be his matchmaker, until he was sent by the court to quell the rebellion of Prime Minister Yang Yaozhong in Dongting Lake. He met my aunt. Prime Minister Zhong couldn't defeat my uncle on the battlefield, so he resorted to assassination. Prime Minister Zhong was the cult leader of the Ming dynasty in Jiangnan. His kung fu was top-notch, and he had many capable people under him. Once my uncle's life was hanging by a thread, my aunt happened to be living in seclusion nearby. When she passed by, she saved him and brought him home to treat his wounds. After a long time, they fell in love, and my aunt married him. Love develops over time. Song Qingshu's expression suddenly became strange. What? Li Qingluo looked at him strangely. It's nothing. Song Qingshu smiled sheepishly. It was all the fault of those old drivers in his previous life. They made it impossible for him to look straight at many normal words. Things like dealing with thousands of affairs every day, penetrating every nook and cranny, arguing with scholars. He hurriedly threw those disrespectful thoughts out of his mind. As far as I know, Yu Fei's wife was Li Hua. Is she your aunt? Yes, Li Hua is only my aunt's alias. My aunt's real name is Li Songhai. At the mention of her aunt, Li Qingluo's eyes flashed with deep reverence and respect. Li Songhai, Song Qingshu exclaimed. Many of his previous doubts were suddenly cleared up. Li Songhai could be considered one of the most mysterious women in the Golden Book. She was only mentioned once in the book Demigods and Semi-Devils, when recalling the past of Wu Yizi and Li Qiushui. After that, her whereabouts were never mentioned again. Everyone only knew that she was Li Qiushui's younger sister. At a young age, Wu Yizi was infatuated with her. The jade statue that Wu Yizi carved in the Infinite Jade Cave was based on her. She was the goddess that Duan Yu later mentioned. As for Li Songhai's final whereabouts, there were many speculations on the internet. For example, some people thought that she had married into the Morong family, and some even thought that she was the sweeping monk. Song Qingshu would never have thought that she had married Yu Fei. Song Qingshu suddenly realized a key problem. That's not right, the ages don't match. Li Qiushui should be at least 80 or 90 years old. Li Songhai was her younger sister, so she would not be that young. When Yu Fei was killed, he was only in his 30s. Even if he had lived until now, he would only be in his 60s. My aunt is older than my uncle. What's so strange about that? Li Qingluo snorted, clearly dissatisfied. So it's a brother-sister relationship. Old Yu sure is trendy. Song Qingshu had a strange expression on his face. As if his expression had hit her sore spot, Li Qingluo said angrily, "My aunt has the beauty of a celestial being, and she has cultivated a divine skill. Her beauty has remained the same for decades. So what if she is older by a few years? In this world, there are only men who are not worthy of her. There is no man who is not worthy of her." Song Qingshu looked at her in surprise. "You seem to be very worried about your aunt." Li Qingluo's expression changed slightly. After a moment of silence, she said, "Back then, my father suddenly disappeared, and my mother." She wanted to say something, but stopped. In the end, she skipped this part and continued. "At that time, I was only in my teens. I had no one to rely on, so I wandered to Jiangnan. If I hadn't met my aunt by chance, who knows where I would have been sold by human traffickers. Not only did my aunt take me in, but she also arranged an excellent marriage for me." The other party was the Wang family of Lin Chuan in the southern Song dynasty. Wang family of Lin Chuan. Song Qingshu's expression changed. "The descendants of the Wang Engshi family?" "Yes." Li Qingluo nodded. After the Jinkong Rebellion, the Jin kingdom invaded the south, and the Wang family moved from Lin Chuan to Gusu. I didn't know that Wang Yuyin's family was so powerful. Song Qingshu secretly clicked his tongue. Among the most prominent families of the Song dynasty, the Jinding Han family that Han Xianzhou belonged to was considered the most prominent family of the Song dynasty. The Wang family of Lin Chuan could be roughly ranked 6th. The power of the Wang family was evident. "Your aunt's martial arts are so high. Why did she allow Yu Fei to be wrongly killed in prison?" Song Qingshu suddenly became puzzled again. "You also think that my uncle was wrongly accused?" Li Qingluo's gaze toward him suddenly became much gentler. Song Qingshu subconsciously answered, "Yu Fei's murder was like snow in June, a great injustice. If this is not injustice, then there is no such thing as injustice in the world." As a transmigrator, he naturally had an objective judgment of Yu Fei. He didn't realize that in this world, although many people felt that Yu Fei was wrongly accused, the court did not vindicate him. This caused more people who didn't know the truth to think that Yu Fei really had the intention to rebel. Therefore, his casual words won Li Qingluo's favor. "Thank you." Li Qingluo sighed faintly. If uncle and aunt knew about this in the underworld, they would probably feel slightly gratified. "Your aunt is dead." Song Qingshu was shocked. "Didn't you just ask why my aunt, with her high martial arts skills, would allow uncle to be wrongly killed?" Li Qingluo bit her lip and said hatefully, "It's all fate's fault. If it was any other day, aunt would naturally not be afraid. At worst, she would just break into prison and escape with uncle. But coincidentally, aunt was pregnant at that time and was about to give birth. In addition, Qin Hui and his group of villains acted too quickly, so aunt couldn't save him in time. In the face of fate, human strength is indeed too insignificant." Song Qingshu sighed with deep sympathy. It must be known that with his current martial arts cultivation, he could remain calm and unruffled no matter what he encountered. However, the higher his martial arts cultivation, the more he could faintly feel the shackles of fate. Often, he would feel a sense of helplessness. What's even more hateful is that after Qin Hui and his group killed Yu Fei and his ex-wife's son, Yu Yun, they sent a large number of assassins to kill Aunt and Yu Fei's posthumous child. Coincidentally, Aunt gave birth to a baby girl that day, and her vitality was greatly damaged. She was no match for the assassins, so she could only forcibly support her weak body after giving birth and desperately carry her daughter out of the city. After that, there was no news of her. Li Qingluo spoke of the sad part, and tears flowed uncontrollably. Song Qingshu extended a finger and gently wiped away her tears. "You don't have to be too pessimistic. Sometimes, No news is the best news. Your aunt's martial arts are so great. Perhaps she's already escaped. Li Qingluo shook her head. I obviously wouldn't be worried if it were any other day, but when she gave birth that day, assassins rushed into the estate. According to reliable sources, Aunt was already at the end of her rope when she escaped from the city. She only managed to hold on bitterly with a single strand of will. Song Qingshu did not ask how she knew about this. With her identity as the White Lotus Mother, investigating something like this should not have been difficult after so many years. Li Qingluo bit her lip and said, "Originally, I had no interest in practicing martial arts, but when that happened, I discovered how powerless I was. As a result, from the day Aunt was killed, I made up my mind to practice martial arts. As a result, I returned to the immeasurable mountains in Dali from Jiangnan and moved all the martial arts manuals my parents had left behind back to the Montois villa." Song Qingshu's expression suddenly became strange. He had seen the latter part of this in the original work of the demigods and semi-devils, so he thought about it. He could not help but ask, "Did you run into your nemesis, Duan Zhengchun, in Dali? You know about this as well?" Li Qingluo furrowed her brows, but she snorted very soon. "Who does Duan Zhengchun think he is? Why would I be interested in him? It's just that after Qin Hui and his party killed Uncle's family, they began to monitor the movements of those who had always been on good terms with Uncle. With my relationship with Uncle and Aunt, I was obviously a key target of surveillance. My death was not to be regretted, but I was worried that no one would avenge Uncle and Aunt after I died. That playboy Duan Zhengchun just happened to come over, so I went with the flow and pretended to fall in love with him. When Qin Hui and his party saw that my uncle and aunt had died, I actually fell in love with a man without a care in the world. Moreover, I was still engaged to the Wang family at the time. When they saw me do something so shameless, they immediately lowered their guard against me, which was why I was able to survive the disaster safely. Afterwards, I secretly practiced martial arts. Although I'd already passed the optimal age for practicing martial arts, the martial arts of the free and unfettered sect placed the most importance on comprehension. Age was actually secondary. Fortunately, my talent in martial arts was still passable. With the help of the Northern Underworld Divine Arts, in just a few short decades, my martial arts had already become more powerful than most people in the Jianghu. Afterwards, I coincidentally became the White Lotus cult's mother. Chapter 1070. Song Qingshu suddenly thought of something and said with a strange expression, "You said that you were just fooling around with Duan Zhengchun, but Wang Yiyin is Duan Zhengchun's daughter. Could it be that you've turned the act into reality?" He couldn't help but think of a joke from his previous life. To sum up, there were only two sources of peerless beauties. One was Duan Zhengchun's sperm, and the other was Li Qiushui's eggs. Wang Yiyin had both. No wonder Duan Yu was head over heels for her. Who told you that Yu Yin is Duan Zhengchun's daughter? Li Qingluo was furious. Then whose daughter is she? Song Qingshu was dumbfounded by her fierce reaction. Of course she's my husband's daughter. Li Qingluo said in a bad mood. Are you sure? Song Qingshu couldn't digest such an unusual thing. Why didn't they follow the original work? This butterfly effect was really big. How can I not be sure? Li Qingluo frowned, clearly not understanding what he was doubting. What I mean is that sometimes pregnancy calculations aren't that accurate. Song Qingshu had always been doubtful about one thing. If a woman slept with two different men for 2 consecutive days and got pregnant, how could she be sure who the child belonged to? In all kinds of movies, women seemed to know who the father of the child was. But was it really possible in real life? After hearing Song Qingshu's doubts, Li Qingluo's face turned pale. She grabbed the pillow on the bed and threw it at his head. She said angrily, I didn't even let that Duan guy get close to me. How could I be pregnant with his child? Song Qingshu was instantly dumbfounded. The direction of the plot was getting more and more wrong. However, according to Li Qingluo's personality, she probably wouldn't lie. He couldn't help but sigh. A playboy like Duan Zhengchun actually had a time when he failed. Thinking of Dao Baifeng's green hat, Song Qingshu suddenly felt some sympathy for Duan Zhengchun. Whether you believe it or not, other than my husband, you're the only man I have." The moment Li Qingluo said this, she was completely stunned. She couldn't understand why she would deliberately explain like this. Song Qingshu raised his eyebrows and couldn't help but whistle. "We've struck it big this time." Li Qingluo glared at him fiercely. "Shameless." Song Qingshu's face suddenly showed a hint of ambiguity. He pointed to the bed sheet under her body and said, "Dirty? I wonder who bled more just now." "You." Li Qingluo suddenly stood up. In all these years as the White Lotus Mother, when had she ever heard something so frivolous? A sliver of killing intent immediately appeared in her eyes, but as soon as she stood up, her lower abdomen immediately ached. Her legs weakened, and she immediately lost her footing and fell over. "Madam's legs have gone soft." Song Qingshu hugged her warm body and said with a smile, "It's all your fault." As soon as Li Qingluo said that, she immediately felt that it was inappropriate. It seemed more like the tone between lovers. So she pushed him away in a hurry and sat back down on the bed. Seeing how she was showing signs of anger from embarrassment, Song Qingshu decided to stop provoking her for now. He changed the topic in a hurry and said, "Since nothing happened between you and Duan Zhengshun, why did Qin Hongyan send her daughter to kill you time and time again?" "She's stupid." Li Qingluo snorted in disdain. "She thinks the one surnamed Duan left her because I interfered. She doesn't know that the one surnamed Duan needs the 100 barbarians behind Dao Baifeng to stabilize the Duan family's throne. He's already taking an extremely great risk by flirting with other women behind Dao Baifeng's back. So how would he be bold enough to actually marry an outsider?" Song Qingshu secretly admired Li Qingluo. As expected of the White Lotus Mother and the daughter-in-law of the Wang clan of Lin River, her insight could not be compared to regular women of the Jianghu. When he watched the demigods and semi-devils in his past life, he was also left perplexed. Why was a mighty king like Duan Zhengshun actually unable to marry his close female friends? He could only ruin their lives. After arriving in this world, especially after entering the imperial court of the Jin and Qin kingdoms, he devoted himself to studying the situation of the various countries. Only after learning a thing or two about the situation of Dali did he understand. Although the Duan clan of Dali was renowned, the authority of Dali was still in the hands of a few ethnic minorities. Among them, the Bai clan was the most powerful. It could be said that whoever obtained the support of the Bai clan could become the emperor of Dali. Dao Baifeng was the daughter of the Bai clan's patriarch. Coupled with the fact that the Bai clan practiced monogamy, why would Duan Zhengshun be bold enough to bring his lover back home? "All right, I've said what I need to say. What do you plan on doing to me?" Li Qingluo asked rather coldly. "Heir, I've always revered you, Wumo. Since you're his relative, why would I make things difficult for you? You just stay here and recuperate." Song Qingshu smiled awkwardly. "Take off your clothes," Li Qingluo said emotionlessly. "Ah, you still want it?" Song Qingshu looked at her in surprise. "Want my ass?" Li Qingluo immediately flew into a rage. "I just don't want to be wrapped in a blanket forever." He looked at her and saw that she was wrapped in a blanket, revealing her snow-white shoulders and neck. She was even more alluring than when she was naked. Song Qingshu could not help but gulp. Suddenly, he felt his abdomen heat up slightly again. He was not a beast after all. He knew that unless he used force, she would never agree again. As a result, he could only suppress his beautiful thoughts and take off his clothes, draping them over her shoulders. Li Qingluo's eyes drooped as she said coldly, "You can get lost now." Song Qingshu smiled bitterly. No matter what, he had taken advantage of her in this matter. Being scolded a few times by her was nothing. "Wait!" When Song Qingshu walked to the door, Li Qingluo suddenly called out to him. "What is it?" Song Qingshu was delighted and turned around to look at her. Li Qingluo looked hesitant. After a long time, she asked hesitantly, Do you have something going on with you, Yin?" "Madam, do you miss us?" Song Qingshu asked with a smile. Li Qingluo's face turned cold. "You're not allowed to have any thoughts about you, Yin, in the future." Song Qingshu raised his eyebrows. "Madam, You're only not allowed to have any thoughts about Yu Yan. Does that mean that I can have any thoughts about Madam? He deliberately emphasized the word thoughts, and his tone was rather ambiguous. Get lost. Li Qingluo responded with a pillow. Song Qingshu smiled bitterly and returned to his room with the pillow. He saw a young girl in the room with her hands supporting her head, dozing off on the table. Who else could it be but Mu Wanqing? Song Qingshu immediately felt a wave of guilt. He was about to step forward and carry her to the bed to rest when Mu Wanqing had already heard the sound of the door opening. She raised her head in a daze. Why are you so late? This question was asked very naturally, as if a wife was greeting her husband who came home late. Song Qingshu's heart warmed. At the same time, he didn't dare to tell her the truth so as not to hurt her heart. He could only say her injuries were more serious, so it took a long time. Oh, then you must be very tired. Go to sleep. It's very late. Mu Wanqing said very naturally. The two of them had already slept on the same bed. Although it didn't develop to the last step, they had done everything else that should and should not have been done. Okay, just now, although Li Qingluo's place was filled with the pleasure of hormones, there was no love in his heart, only lust. It was different from Mu Wanqing. He loved her from the bottom of his heart. I'm going to kill that woman. Who knew that Mu Wanqing's expression would suddenly change? She pulled out the sword beside her and was about to rush out. What's wrong? Song Qingshu hurriedly stopped her. Mu Wanqing bit her lip, her eyes filled with grievance. After a long time, she said, You have her fragrance on you. Song Qingshu's scalp went numb. He instantly felt the aura of the Azura field. However, now that things had come to this, he could only brace himself and explain, I wanted to save her, so of course I couldn't avoid coming into contact with her. It was inevitable that I would be infected by the fragrance on her body. Then what about your clothes? Mu Wanqing pointed at his body, tears faintly appearing in her eyes. Song Qingshu cursed inwardly. It was all his fault that he was still shocked by the information that Li Qingluo had told him, causing his reaction to be slower than usual. He had actually made such a low-level mistake. When I was treating her, her clothes were drenched in sweat. In order to prevent her from exposing herself, I put my clothes on her. With his nonsensical words, Song Qingshu actually found a reasonable excuse. Why are you so good to her? Mu Wanqing did not doubt his words, but she could not help but feel jealous. Actually, it's like this. Song Qingshu understood the principle of saying too much would lead to mistakes. If she continued to ask, it was inevitable that he would give himself away. He hurriedly took the initiative to change the topic and told her about how Yu Fei was Li Qingluo's little uncle. After he finished, Song Qingshu sighed and said, Wanqing, Yu Wumu is the hero of all Han people. I have always admired him very much. This time, I ran into his relative, so how could I harden my heart to hurt her? Hearing his words, Mu Wanqing's expression changed several times. Suddenly, she sighed faintly and said, But I'm not Han. Only then did Song Qingshu realize that whether it was Mu Wanqing's biological father or adoptive father, one was from the Dali Duanshi and the other was from the Shishamu clan, they were not Han people. Your mother is Han, so of course you're also half Han. Song Qingshu hurriedly comforted her. Song Qingshu, if you knew my mother's background, I'm afraid you wouldn't like me anymore. Mu Wanqing suddenly began to cry. Seeing that she was crying for no reason, Song Qingshu immediately became anxious. He hurriedly wiped her tears and said, What's wrong? Did I make you sad? Don't you admire Yu Wumu the most? Mu Wanqing said, while sobbing. Is there a problem? Song Qingshu hurriedly asked. My mother's surname is Qin. Mu Wanqing cried, even louder. So what if her surname is Qin? Song Qingshu was still confused. Qin from Qin Hui. Mu Wanqing looked at him with tears in her eyes. Although her voice was soft, it was like a clap of thunder. Song Qingshu was dumbfounded. He never thought that she would be related to Qin Hui. Is your mother Qin Hui's daughter? Song Qingshu asked tentatively. Chapter 1071. Listening to Mu Wanqing's sobbing narration, Song Qingshu finally figured out the ins and outs of the matter. After Qin Hui killed Yu Fei, He became very powerful in the country, coupled with his many henchmen. Even Emperor Zhao Go was afraid of him and worried that he would seize the throne. Zhao Go was lucky. Qin Hui was old and couldn't hold on any longer. Before he died, he wanted his son to take over his position, but Zhao Go politely refused. Everyone in the Qin family was instantly shaken. They knew that they had stood at the heart of the struggle these few years and had offended many people. Adding on the fact that Zhao Go's attitude was also ambiguous and hard to understand, the people of the Qin family were worried that they would be punished in the future and that they would be exterminated. Thus, they had started planning for the future very early on. After Qin Hui's death, Zhao Go found an excuse to retire all the Qin family members. The Qin family took the opportunity to move abroad. At that time, only the Jin dynasty and the Qin dynasty could compete with the Southern Song dynasty. Qin Hui had a good relationship with the Jin dynasty, but the Jin dynasty used him to control the court of the Southern Song dynasty. Now that the Qin family had lost its power in the Southern Song dynasty, the Jin dynasty had lost its value. If they went to the Jin, they might be sold to the Southern Song for more benefits. The Qin and the Jin were brothers. Since they couldn't go to the Jin, they couldn't go to the Qin either. Other than the Qin and the Jin, Dali was too weak, Tubo was too remote, Mongolia was too far away, and Liao was struggling at death's door. In the end, only Xixia was left. It had a feud with the Song and wouldn't betray the Qin family. It was strong enough to protect itself. In addition, Xixia was in dire need of talents. It was easy for the Qin family to make a name for themselves there. Thus, after many considerations, the Qin family moved to Xixia. Perhaps because they had done too much evil, Qin Hui and his wife didn't have any children for many years. To avoid having no descendants, they adopted the son of his wife's brother and named him Qin Hui. After Qin Hui's death, Qin Hui became the leader of the Qin family. Mu Wanqing's mother, Qin Hongmian, was also from the Qin family. In terms of seniority, she was Qin Hui's niece. She had been beautiful since she was young. After the Qin family came to Xixia, they promised Qin Hongmian to him. In order to gain a foothold there, the Xixia general Mu Yuqi wanted to remarry. At that time, Qin Hongmian had already met Duan Zhengchun in the Jianghu and was even pregnant with his flesh and blood. Unfortunately, Duan Zhengchun could not marry her. No matter what, the Qin clan was still a prestigious clan. How could they allow a woman of the Qin clan to get pregnant before marriage? Because her clansmen kept pressuring her, and because Qin Hongmian wanted to hide the fact that she was pregnant, she had no choice but to marry Mu Yuqi. Mu Yuqi was the great general of the Western Xia country and held nearly half of the military power in the Western Xia country. His sister was also the empress of the Western Xia country. The Qin family had used Qin Hongmian to cling onto this thick thigh and finally settled down in the Western Xia country. Wanqing, even if you were Qin Hui's granddaughter, I would still like you, let alone the fact that you and your mother are only members of the Qin family. Song Qingshu hugged her and said softly, "Everyone has to bear their own sins. What does it have to do with their loved ones? You and your mother can't choose where you come from, but you can choose what you will do in the future. You haven't helped Qin Hui over the years, so why would I take my anger out on you?" "Really?" Mu Wanqing looked at him with a face full of surprise. Of course it's true. Song Qingshu didn't understand why the other party was so excited. It turned out that in this world, the son had to pay the father's debts, and the daughter had to pay the mother's debts. Although Mu Wanqing wasn't Qin Hui's granddaughter, she still had some family connections. This had always been a knot in her heart. So Song Qingshu's advanced thinking naturally hit Mu Wanqing's heart. "You're so nice." Mu Wanqing threw herself into his arms and pressed her face tightly against his chest. Hugging her soft and youthful body, Song Qingshu suddenly felt a wave of warmth. He hurriedly hugged her and comforted her softly. "Song Qingshu, you're so bad." Mu Wanqing's face suddenly turned as red as rouge, and she pouted coquettishly. "What's wrong?" Song Qingshu was startled. Mu Wanqing glanced at the lower part of his abdomen and said with a red face, "Are you holding it in? Do you want me to help you?" As she spoke, she shrunk back into the blanket. Song Qingshu's face heated up. He couldn't help but curse himself for being a beast. She probably felt it when their bodies were pressed against each other. He hurriedly helped her up and said softly, "No need. I just want to hug you and sleep." Mu Wanqing was grateful. She curled up his arms and gently drew circles on his chest with her fingers. "Song Lang, do you blame me for not giving my body to you?" Song Qingshu smiled slightly. "How could that be? In my heart, you're the most pure girl. If I was really pure, I wouldn't have done that for you. Mu Wanqing's face heated up. She lightly spat and sighed faintly. "Song Lang, it's not that I don't want to give it to you. It's just that my mother suffered too much because she got pregnant out of wedlock. She warned me, since I was a child, to learn from her mistakes and made me promise her that I would never make the same mistake again. I don't want to see her sad, so..." Song Qingshu hurriedly hugged her and comforted her. "I know the reason. So in the future, I will go to your house to propose marriage. After I get your mother's approval, I will bully you." Mu Wanqing's face reddened. Her expression suddenly became bashful. "Actually, if Song Lang, you really want to bully me now, I won't refuse you." Song Qingshu shook his head. "Your big brother Song is not a beast. I will save the most beautiful moment of your life for the wedding night." Mu Wanqing was moved. She hung on his neck and whispered, "Big brother Song." The two of them stayed like this for a long time. Mu Wanqing suddenly raised her head. Her eyes were shining. "Big brother Song, if you really want it, you can go next door and find that Madame Lu. I won't be jealous." She had been raised by Qin Hongmian and lived in seclusion deep in the mountains. Her temperament was very similar to her mother's. At the same time, she never had any ethical principles in her mind. In her opinion, it didn't matter if Miss Cheng was Madame Lu or another madam. As long as her lover liked her, it didn't matter what happened between the two of them. It just so happened that Miss Cheng had heard the noise next door. She struggled for a long time in her heart. In the end, she couldn't suppress her curiosity. She put her ear to the wall to eavesdrop and happened to hear this sentence. She was startled and hastily ran back to the bed. She curled up under the quilt. Her heart was immediately filled with worry. Will he come over later? If he really comes, should I pretend to be asleep or fight back with all my might? Song Qingshu didn't know whether to laugh or cry at Mu Wanqing's words. He gently kissed her forehead. "I won't go anywhere tonight. I just want to sleep with you in my arms." "Okay." Mu Wanqing's face lit up with joy. She twisted her body and changed into a more comfortable position as she curled up in his arms. Song Qingshu smiled knowingly. He hugged her and comforted her gently. On the other hand, Miss Cheng next door was filled with worry. She did not sleep the entire night. At dawn the next day, Song Qingshu woke up. The joy Diana that he cultivated mainly focused on yin and yang qi, so he didn't need to sleep as much as ordinary people. Seeing that Mu Wanqing was sleeping like a baby, Song Qingshu gently kissed her forehead and quietly walked out of the room. He ordered his subordinates to prepare breakfast for Mu Wanqing and ordered a few of her favorite snacks. Suddenly, he remembered that the White Lotus Mother was in the courtyard. After a moment of hesitation, he ordered his subordinates to prepare a new set of women's clothes. He took the clothes and made his way to her room. When he opened the door, she had already vanished without a trace. The room was empty. Song Qingshu was not surprised. He had been expecting this long ago. Suddenly, his gaze landed on a piece of paper on the table. Song Qingshu immediately smiled bitterly. "I wonder if I'll release the tiger back in the mountains this time." It turned out that there were a few beautiful but fierce words written on the piece of paper. "Yesterday's humiliation, I will definitely return it in the future." When he returned to the room, Mu Wanqing was already up. Just as Song Qingshu wanted to talk about love with her, there was a noise at the entrance of the courtyard. "I am Mu Wanqing's uncle. Why can't I go in?" Then a hunchback rushed in. Reporting to the marshal, several guards were sweating profusely. Just as they were about to use force to get him out, Song Qingshu waved his hand, indicating for them to leave. "So it's Hero Mu." Song Qingshu cupped his hands and said, "I'm not worthy of being called a hero." Mu Gaofeng laughed awkwardly. He turned to Mu Wanqing and said, "Come back with me." "But uncle..." Mu Wanqing still wanted to say something, but Mu Gaofeng immediately interrupted her. Have you forgotten your mother's lesson? Mu Wanqing immediately fell silent. Only then did Mu Gaofeng say to Song Qingshu, "Sir, although your martial arts are matchless, the daughter of my Mu family can't be bullied for no reason. If you're interested in our family's girl, you can come to Xixia and marry her. Before that, I'm sorry that I can't let her stay here with you." Song Qingshu frowned. He was about to say something, but Mu Wanqing was worried that he would vent his anger on Mu Gaofeng. She hurriedly pulled him aside and whispered, "Song Qingshu, Uncle Gaofeng has been very good to me since I was a child. Don't blame him." Song Qingshu smiled. "He's your uncle, so naturally, he's my uncle. Why would I blame him?" "Thank you, Song Qingshu." Mu Wanqing smiled sweetly, which made Song Qingshu's bones soften. "But this time Uncle came to me because something happened at home, so I have to go back with him. So soon." Song Qingshu frowned. "I can't bear to leave you." Mu Wanqing's face turned red. She quietly glanced at Mu Gaofeng and whispered, "But Uncle just said that. How can I continue to stay here?" Song Qingshu smiled bitterly. Although with his martial arts and power, he didn't care about Mu Gaofeng at all. But he was Mu Wanqing's elder, and he was in the right. He and Mu Wanqing didn't have any status. It was really not good for her reputation to hang around like this. "After I deal with the things here, I will come to Xixia to find you as soon as possible." Song Qingshu didn't want to put Mu Wanqing in a difficult position, so he gave up the idea of forcing her to stay. And when Mu Wanqing saw that Mu Gaofeng wasn't paying attention to them, she tiptoed and kissed Song Qingshu. Then, she ran back to Mu Gaofeng's side as if she was escaping. Looking at the backs of the two of them leaving, Song Qingshu suddenly felt lost. Chapter 1072. Perhaps it was because she came out in a hurry, but Cheng Yaojia was hit. She immediately lost her balance and fell backward. Song Qingshu stretched out his arm and gently held her waist. His other hand supported her back and supported her in midair. "Song? Prince Song?" Cheng Yaojia's face turned red. When she realized their current position, she felt dizzy. "I'm really sorry. My protective Jinqi automatically counterattacked. I didn't hurt you, did I?" Song Qingshu asked softly. No. Cheng Yaojia shook her head. She realized that their current position was a bit inappropriate. Half of her body was tightly pressed against his lower abdomen. She quickly struggled to get up. Can you let me get up first?" Song Qingshu reached out and helped her up. "Madam, why did you come out in such a hurry? Is there something wrong?" I... Cheng Yaojia suddenly stuttered. She couldn't help but think of the conversation she had overheard last night. She had been worried for the rest of the night. Naturally, it was not convenient for her to tell him. She could only say, "It's like this. Young master, didn't you go to the clear Jade Monastery yesterday? I wanted to ask if there was any news about my husband." "Young Master Lu." Song Qingshu pondered for a moment and then said, "I went to see him for you yesterday. How is he now?" Although Cheng Yaojia had been flirting with him recently, Lu Guining was her husband after all. They had been together for so many years. No matter what, they had a lot of feelings for each other. Song Qingshu hesitated for a moment and then told her the truth. "His condition is not very good. Lu Guining had been tortured by the Mongolians. He had probably lost half of his life." Cheng Yaojia suddenly felt dizzy and her body involuntarily swayed. "Madam, don't worry too much. The situation is not as bad as you think." Song Qingshu hurriedly supported her and took her hand to the pavilion in the middle of the garden. "Let's sit there and talk about it." Cheng Yaojia's cheeks were hot, and her eyes fell on the other person's hand that was holding hers. She wondered if this person was intentionally or unintentionally taking advantage of her. Could it be that he had been pretending to be a golden man for so long that he had also picked up the golden man's careless habits? But he was clearly a Han, so how could he casually hold a woman's hand? After hesitating for a long time, Miss Cheng didn't say anything. She just let him lead her to the pavilion and sit down. Young Master Lu suffered much torture from the Mongolians in Clear Jade Monastery, but his life is not in danger. Foreign can be at ease. Song Qingshu roughly described Lu Guining's situation and suddenly paused. On the other hand, I don't know if I should say it or not. What is it? Cheng Yaojia opened her big eyes and looked at him with flickering eyes. Song Qingshu hesitated for a long time, but in the end he still took out something from his bosom and handed it to her. See for yourself, but you'd better be mentally prepared. Miss Cheng was confused as she took the handkerchief from his bosom. When she saw the bright red words divorce letter at the beginning, her small face, which was originally white and flushed, suddenly lost all color. She suppressed her trembling and read the entire divorce letter. Miss Cheng suddenly felt dizzy and fainted. Fortunately, Song Qingshu's eyes and hands were sharp. Otherwise, she would have fallen to the ground. After a long time, Cheng Yaojia slowly woke up. She had a tearful expression on her face as she muttered to herself, "How could he be like this? I've been thinking of all sorts of ways to save him. How could he be like this?" Seeing her dazed appearance, Song Qingshu sighed and said, "There must be a misunderstanding. If I'm not wrong, he must have misunderstood our relationship. That's why he wrote this divorce letter on impulse. But there's clearly nothing between us." Miss Cheng bit her lip and said, "Is there really nothing between us?" Song Qingshu looked at her thoughtfully. Miss Cheng's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't help but think of the scene when he was on top of her. Yes, although she kept saying that she had a clear conscience, did she really have a clear conscience? Miss Cheng suddenly felt a deep sense of guilt. She immediately understood her husband's behavior. She looked at Song Qingshu gratefully and said, "Thank you." If he hadn't reminded her, she probably wouldn't have realized the problem. Previously, she had misunderstood that he had bad intentions towards her. However, after interacting with him for this period of time, she realized that he was really a gentleman. Of course, he also had beastly moments, but for a man, that was quite normal. "You don't need to thank me. The main thing is that I don't want to be the culprit that affects your relationship as a husband and wife." As soon as Song Qingshu said this, he somewhat despised himself. Even though he was a whore, he still wanted to maintain a chastity. Miss Cheng bit her lip and suddenly knelt in front of him. "Young master, I want to ask you a favor." "Madam, please get up." Song Qingshu hurriedly reached out to help her up. Unexpectedly, Miss Cheng twisted her body and refused his help. Tears streamed down her face as she said, "If you don't agree, I will continue to kneel here and not get up." Song Qingshu had to give up. He smiled bitterly and said, "Madam, what do you want? Even if you don't say it, I already know." "Fine, I promise you." "Madam, please get up." "Young master, you agree?" Miss Cheng asked in surprise. "Well, I can't bear to see a beauty cry." Song Qingshu smiled. Miss Cheng's heart skipped a beat when she saw his warm smile. She hurriedly lowered her head and softly said, "Thank you, young master. Since we're going to save him, it's better to do it sooner rather than later. Let's go now." Song Qingshu helped her up and said, "However, there is something I need to tell you first. This time, I can only save young Master Lu. As for the other people in the Southern Song diplomatic mission, I can't do anything. Moreover, I don't want to take this risk. I know, I'm already very satisfied to be able to save Guanying. How can I put you in danger?" After all, Miss Cheng was a woman. What she pursued was nothing more than the happiness of her family. As for the other people in the Southern Song diplomatic mission, they were secondary to her. "Then let's go." Song Qingshu smiled and put his arm around her waist as they hurried toward the clear jade monastery. Miss Cheng's body stiffened, but this time she quickly relaxed her body. She pressed her body tightly against his to reduce the resistance of his movement. She didn't understand. She seemed to be used to this kind of hugging and hugging. She couldn't feel any disgust. Just like this, Song Qingshu brought Miss Cheng all the way to the Clear Jade Monastery. Because he had entered the monastery several times before, Song Qingshu was now very familiar with the place, even if he brought only one person. Along the way, he could clearly feel that the atmosphere was much more somber. However, although the White Lotus Society had suffered a great defeat during their last surprise attack, the White Lotus Society had sent out all their elites. The Mongolians had also suffered heavy losses. It was obvious that there were fewer guards than before, and many of them were injured. The combat power of the White Lotus Society can't be underestimated. This time, There was a mistake in the intelligence, which led to an underestimation. Li Qingluo thought that she could deal with the Southern Song diplomatic mission by herself. If the White Lotus Society really came out in full force, the people of the Ruyang Palace would probably have to bear the consequences. Song Qingshu thought to himself. When he thought of Li Qingluo's hot and moving body, his heart couldn't help but sway. At the same time, he couldn't help but think of Wang Yuyin's pure and flawless face. He didn't know why, but he suddenly felt his body heat up. Umitba, how can I think about this kind of thing? It's too shameless, too vulgar, too dirty. Song Qingshu's rational mind continuously warned himself. However, from time to time, some blood-boiling thoughts would appear in his mind. Young master, I'm a little uncomfortable. Can you put me down? Miss Chung suddenly said in a trembling voice. Song Qingshu was startled at first, but then he noticed the flickering look in her eyes. Only then did he realize that because of his imagination running wild just now, his body had clearly changed. Cheng Yaojia, who was in his embrace, could clearly feel the changes in his body. However, it was not convenient for him to say directly, so he could only act bashfully. Fortunately, Song Qingshu's skin was thick enough. He casually laughed it off and pretended not to know about this matter. He put Miss Chung down and then, with a serious expression, led her to hide here and there in the pure jade monastery. They avoided several hidden sentries and arrived at the place where Lu Guanying was imprisoned. After easily sealing the guards' acupoints, Song Qingshu once again led Miss Chung into the prison cell. Lu Guanying, seeing her husband, who was not far away, only half dead, Miss Chung cried out in alarm. She couldn't help but rush over. Song Qingshu shrugged his shoulders and followed behind her. When Lu Guanying heard the familiar voice, he raised his head in disbelief. When he saw his wife's appearance, his eyes revealed a trace of joy. Miss Chung. However, he immediately saw Song Qingshu behind his wife. His face suddenly became gloomy. Lu Guanying. Miss Chung caressed the wounds on his body. Her heart ached so much that tears streamed down her face like broken pearls. Lu Guanying, you have suffered. Lu Guaning's heart softened. However, when he thought of his wife coming with this man, his heart burned with jealousy. He sternly shouted, "What are you doing here?" Miss Chung didn't expect her husband to react like this. For a moment, she felt wronged and couldn't speak. In the end, Song Qingshu couldn't stand it anymore. He frowned and snorted. Of course I came to save you. Don't bite Lu Dongbin. You don't know how to appreciate my kindness. Lu Guanying was furious. Who needs you to save me? Even if I die here, I won't accept your kindness. Song Qingshu coldly snorted and was about to leave when Miss Chung hurriedly pulled him back. She looked at him with pleading eyes and said, "Young master." Her delicate and pitiful appearance made people feel sorry for her. Song Qingshu stopped and said, "All right, I'll save him again for your sake." After he said that, he stretched out his hand and a sword energy accurately shot at the shackles on Lu Guanying's body. The steel chains immediately broke. Seeing this, Lu Guanying sucked in a breath of cold air. "Thank you, young master." Miss Chung suddenly smiled through her tears. She hurriedly returned to her husband's side and said, "Lu Guanying, you misunderstood young master. He is a good person. When we get out of here, I will slowly explain everything to you." Chapter 1073. Noticing Lu Guanying's reaction, Song Qingshu was immediately unhappy. "I took such a big risk to save you. How am I not a good person? You did it for... Lu Guanying looked at his wife, and his breathing became rapid. "You did it for Yaojia. Do you think I don't know what you were thinking?" Miss Chung hurriedly explained, "Guanying, you misunderstood. There is nothing between us. He is also a gentleman." She had promised Song Qingshu that she would not reveal his true identity to anyone, not even her husband. Song Qingshu calmly said, "Of course I did it for her. Otherwise, why would I take such a big risk to save you when we are not related? You finally admit it." Lu Guanying pointed at him and trembled with anger. Miss Chung couldn't help but stamp her feet. "Guanying, Don't make trouble. It is so dangerous here. When we get to a safe place, I will slowly explain it to you. I made trouble. Being accused by his wife, Lu Guanying was furious. You are blaming me for this, wild man? Miss Cheng's mouth opened slightly. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she felt very wronged. Song Qingshu frowned and reached out to pull Cheng Yaojia back. He gently patted her shoulder to comfort her. Then he said to Lu Guanying, if I remember correctly, you have already written the divorce letter. Cheng Yaojia has nothing to do with you anymore. Even if she really finds another man, you have no right to interfere. To be honest, you are the wild man now. You. Noticing his actions, Lu Guanying's eyes couldn't help but shrink. He found that his wife was used to this and didn't resist at all. His face became even more livid. Young master, please don't provoke him, okay? Miss Cheng hurriedly shook his arm and pleaded softly. Umph! Song Qingshu snorted but didn't say anything else. Miss Cheng ran to her husband's side and begged. Lu Guanying turned his face away and said, even if I die here, I don't want him to save me. Cheng Yaojia was anxious and wanted to say something, but Song Qingshu said, Yaojia, I've already put up with it several times. If it weren't for you, why would I do such a strenuous and unrewarding thing? Since he wants to stay here, let him stay. But Miss Cheng reluctantly looked at her husband and stood there, unable to move forward. Song Qingshu knew that if Lu Guanying didn't leave, Cheng Yaojia wouldn't abandon him. He rolled his eyes and came up with a plan. It's better if he doesn't leave. When the time comes, we won't have to sneak around. Cheng Yaojia was surprised and blushed. She was about to explain when Song Qingshu came to her side and whispered, Madam, I'm trying to provoke him. I hope you can cooperate. Cheng Yaojia immediately understood. However, she vaguely felt that this was a bit inappropriate. But now that things had come to this, she had no other way. She could only lower her head and acquiesce. This adulterous couple. Looking at the two of them hugging each other intimately, Lu Guanying's lungs were about to explode. Humph, who said I won't leave? After saying that, he endured the pain in his body and walked over step by step. Cheng Yaojia was overjoyed and quickly ran over to help him. Lu Guanying wanted to wave her away, but when he saw his wife's tearful eyes, his heart softened. Let me do it. Song Qingshu frowned when he saw the two of them supporting each other. Who needs your help? He was soft-hearted toward his wife because of their many years of love. Lu Guanying naturally didn't have such a good temper. Song Qingshu said coldly, Who asked you and your husband's lightness skills to be so poor? Now that the clear jade monastery is heavily guarded, not to mention a burden like you, even Yaojia alone would not be able to escape. Yaojia, you call me so affectionately. Lu Guanying couldn't help but mutter. Song Qingshu was too lazy to argue with him. Without any explanation, he inserted himself between the two of them. He held Cheng Yaojia's waist with one hand and Lu Guanying's collar with the other. Using his lightness skill, they moved as fast as lightning and soon arrived outside the clear jade monastery. Even though they were enemies, Lu Guanying had to admit that the other party's lightness skill was too high. Even his Grand Master Huang Yaoshi, whom he worshipped as a god, might not be able to compare to him. When he thought of the huge gap between their martial arts and the other parties, and looked at his wife's beautiful face, Lu Guanying's heart felt as if it was blocked by a large stone. He felt uncomfortable, but also a deep sense of powerlessness. Song Qingshu naturally didn't have time to care about the mentality of the weak. He waved his hand, and several disguised Jin bodyguards ran over. First, escort the two of them back to the Dao Tai Yamen and find a doctor to treat young Master Lu. He had just seen Li Kashio's figure in the clear jade monastery and knew that he couldn't delay any longer. It was time to find Li Kashio. Who wants to go to your place? Yaojia, let's go by ourselves. When Lu Guanying heard this, he couldn't take it anymore. He reached out to pull his wife, but who knew that Cheng Yaojia's hand would subconsciously shrink back, causing him to be stunned. At this moment, he faintly felt that he had lost his wife forever. Your Southern Song Dynasty's diplomatic corps has been wiped out by the Mongolians. The Mongolians have many masters under their command. If you hide outside, you may be captured by the Mongolians at any time. It's fine if you're the only one who's captured, since it has nothing to do with me. But if you cause Miss Yaojia to be captured, you won't be able to redeem yourself even if you die 10,000 times, Song Qingshu said coldly. You, Lu Guaning immediately glared at him. Song Qingshu said, "Come to my residence and recuperate." In the whole of Yangzhou, I'm afraid there's no place safer than my place. Lu Guaning still wanted to say something, but Miss Chung hurriedly pulled his hand and whispered, "Guaning, he has a sharp tongue, but a soft heart. Don't take his words to heart. Let's go to his place to treat your injuries first. Then we'll think of a way to save Mr. Han and Uncle Lu." Lu Guaning held his breath. What his wife said was reasonable. He couldn't find a reason to refuse. He was full of depression, but he had nowhere to release it. He could only snort heavily. Seeing that her husband didn't object, Miss Chung was happy. She ran to Song Qingshu and looked at him with her watery eyes. "We're going back. Then what about you? I still have something to do here. You go back first. I'll be back in a while," Song Qingshu said with a smile. Miss Cheng's face turned red. She thought, "Why does it sound like I'm asking you when you'll be back?" After seeing the two of them off, Song Qingshu waited outside the clear jade temple. Sure enough, it didn't take long for Li Kexio to come out. Song Qingshu found a secluded place and took off Tang Quobian's mask. Then he swaggered out in front of Li Kexio's group. "How dare you? You dare to collide with the Land and Water Admiral's carriage." Li Kexio's bodyguards cursed. Song Qingshu smiled. "An old friend has come to visit. Is this how officially treats guests?" Li Kexio heard the commotion and came out to investigate. When she saw Song Qingshu's appearance, she couldn't help but be startled. She hastily ordered her subordinates to leave. Although Song Qingshu was famous throughout the world, there was no television or internet in this world. The number of people who could recognize Song Qingshu could be counted on one hand. However, Li Kexio had received his life-saving grace in the past. Naturally, she could recognize him. "Officially, would you do me the honor of having a cup of tea with you?" Song Qingshu asked with a smile. Li Kexio couldn't help but hesitate. In the end, she nodded and said, "In this world, the number of people who can receive an invitation from Prince Song can be counted on one hand. How can I refuse?" Seeing that Li Kexio didn't address him as Golden Snake King, presumably they were meeting as old friends and not for an official meeting. Song Qingshu understood. He wasn't in a hurry to expose him. He just extended his hand and invited, "Please, please." Li Kexio hurriedly modestly declined. The two of them went to a nearby restaurant. It happened to be the restaurant where Song Qingshu had previously met Mu Wanqing and her party. Li Kexio's subordinates had already cleared the restaurant in advance. Everyone was guarding downstairs. Only Li Kexio and Song Qingshu were on the second floor. Originally, Li Kexio's subordinates, Lu Feiqing and the others, wanted to stay on the second floor to protect him. However, they were chased away by Li Kexio. "If Golden Snake King want to harm me, what difference does it make whether you are here or not? Moreover, I have a good personal relationship with Prince Song. What danger would there be?" Song Qingshu smiled. "Uncle Li is indeed magnanimous. No wonder you are in charge of the 100,000 green camp in Jiangnan." Li Kexio smiled. "You are too polite. We are of the same generation. How could I dare to address you as uncle?" Song Qingshu shook his head. "Your daughter and I have congenial interests. We have long been very good friends. As Yuanji's father, it is only right for me to address you as uncle." When he said this, Li Kexio naturally couldn't say anything more. However, when she heard the content of his words, she couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. She began to think about the relationship between him and her daughter. "Uncle Li, have you finally made a decision after coming out of the clear jade monastery?" The two of them chatted for a while before Song Qingshu suddenly asked, "What decision?" Li Kexio picked up his teacup to hide the uneasiness in his heart. "Uncle Li, we are all on the same side. Let's not beat around the bush." Song Qingshu poured him a cup of tea before continuing. "I wonder if Uncle Li will ultimately choose the Southern Song dynasty or the Mongolian dynasty? Li Keqiu's expression changed several times. In the end, he smiled bitterly. As expected, I can't hide anything from you. I'm also having a headache over this matter. Song Qingshu smiled. Since Uncle Li is having a headache over this matter, how about I give you a third option? A third option? Li Keqiu was startled. However, he quickly thought of something and his expression became awkward. I know Uncle's concerns. You can make your decision after reading this. Song Qingshu took out a letter from his bosom and handed it to the other. This is... Seeing the familiar handwriting on the letter, Li Keqiu's hands trembled. That's right. This was personally written by your honorable wife. I heard that Uncle's family was detained by the Manchurian Qing, so I was somewhat afraid of taking action, so I specially rescued your honorable wife, your son, and the others from Yanjing City. Now they are being entertained in the Golden Snake Camp with good food and drinks. I dare not neglect them. Song Qingshu said slowly. Chapter 1074. Now that Yanjing City was actually under the control of Song Qingshu, it was really not difficult to rescue Li Keqiu's family. Looking at the contents of the letter, Li Keqiu's expression changed several times. She slowly closed her eyes. After a long time, she said, I'm very clear about the purpose of your visit. Back then, you saved my father and my daughter's lives. This time, you have saved my family. With this friendship, we are not strangers. There are some things that I will tell you truthfully. Uncle Li, please speak. Song Qingshu knew that things were not so simple, so he did not look too surprised. Now that the heroes of the world are rising, although I have 100,000 troops under my command, I do not have the ability to unify the world, so I have always been looking for a wise ruler. Li Keqiu paused and looked at him meaningfully. Nephew, although the Golden Snake Camp is famous throughout the world, but forgive me for speaking bluntly, I am afraid that it is impossible to conquer the Central Plains. Song Qingshu raised his eyebrows and calmly asked, Why does Uncle Li say this? Li Keqiu sighed. These years, Huaxia has fallen. The Central Plains region has risen up with volunteer armies everywhere. I do not know how many volunteer armies have suddenly flourished and then suddenly declined. Watching them entertain guests, watching them collapse. In the end, it is because the volunteer armies do not understand what political power is. They can be roving bandits, but they absolutely cannot conquer the world. Originally, with our friendship, it should be the best choice for me to rely on the Golden Snake Camp. But since it is not possible for the Golden Snake Camp to unify the world, then relying on the Golden Snake Camp is putting my family at great risk. Li Keqiu said, Rather than our family vanishing in the future, it is better to be a hero now. Right now, at most I will sacrifice my wife, son, and a few others. If I rely on the Golden Snake Camp and the Golden Snake Camp is destroyed in the future, it will be a disaster for our entire family. I hope nephew can understand. Song Qingshu smiled slightly. It is normal for Uncle Li to have these concerns, but the Golden Snake Camp under my leadership is different from the other roving bandit-like volunteer armies. Not only do we have the strength to defeat the powerful Qing army, we can also govern the Shandong region in good order and the people living and working in peace and contentment. Yangzhou is not very far from Shandong. Presumably Uncle Li also knows that what I said is not false. Li Keqiu nodded slightly and said, That's right. These days, Shandong is indeed a prosperous place. Then he changed the topic and continued, But in my opinion, this is only a temporary prosperity. After the Qing imperial court has quelled the rebellion of the 3 border states, they will not be able to tolerate the existence of the Golden Snake Battalion. The Jin Kingdom has always advanced and retreated with the Qing Kingdom. At that time, under the oppression of the 2 great military powers, how long can the Golden Snake Battalion last? This actually represented the majority of the world's views on the future of the Golden Snake Battalion. After all, the Jin Kingdom was to the west of the Golden Snake Battalion, the Qing Kingdom was to the north, and the vast sea was to the east. There was simply no room for expansion. Maintaining the current situation was already the limit. What future did they have? Qing Kingdom and Jin Kingdom? Song Qingshu smiled mysteriously and said, Uncle Li, since we're not on the same side, There are some things that I can't tell you directly. I can only say that the Qing Kingdom and the Jin Kingdom will not be a hindrance to the Golden Snake Camp. Instead, they will help the Golden Snake Camp. The fact that he had secretly controlled the Jin Kingdom and the Qing Kingdom was his biggest secret and trump card. Naturally, he would not casually tell others. It was not that Song Qingshu did not consider using this as a bargaining chip to persuade Li Kashio to join them. In theory, the chances of success were very high, but the risk was too great. If Li Kashio leaked this matter, all his previous arrangements would be for naught. Therefore, he had a trump card in his hand, but he could not easily use it. What do you mean? Li Kashio was also an old fox who had been in the officialdom for a long time. He quickly realized the mystery in his words. Song Qingshu sorted out his words and said, I can only say that I can influence the decisions of the imperial court of the two countries to a certain extent. I wonder if Uncle Li is satisfied with this? You can influence the decisions of the imperial court? Li Kashio was shocked, but he also understood that these few words could be big or small. The key was to what extent it could influence. If he asked the other party directly, the other party would definitely not tell him the details. However, he could try to beat around the bush. If Virtuous Nephew can make Songgotu and Tranquil leave Yangzhou, I can consider forming an alliance with the Golden Snake Battalion. During this period of time, Songgotu and Tranquil were in Yangzhou, giving him a lot of pressure. He wanted to do something, but he was unable to do it. Naturally, he was eager for these two gods of plague to leave as soon as possible. Of course, Li Kashio was only speaking thoughtlessly. Even if Song Qingshu kept on saying that he could influence the imperial court of the Qing Kingdom and the Jin Kingdom, Songgotu and Tranquil were the number one figures in their respective imperial court. He did not think that the other party had this kind of ability to influence these two people. Li Kashio deliberately said this because he wanted Song Qingshu to know the difficulty and back off. He did not want to be too straightforward and make everyone feel awkward. Who would have thought that Song Qingshu looked at him with a strange expression and asked, Is what Uncle Li said true? Li Kashio was startled in his heart, but he still nodded his head and said, Of course it's true. In his heart, these two were prime ministers. How could they be so easily influenced by the Golden Snake Battalion? Then it's a deal. Song Qingshu smiled mysteriously, making Li Kashio's heart palpitate. He always felt as if he had fallen into a pit. After parting with Li Kashio, Song Qingshu did not return to the Daotai Yamen. Instead, he went to a secret stronghold of the Golden Dragon Gang and immediately wrote a secret edict for Songgotu. He carried a lot of this kind of blank secret edict stamped with the Imperial Jade Seal on his person, just in case he needed it. In addition, when he was disguised as Kangxi in the Forbidden City, he had studied Kangxi's notes to perfection. Therefore, this secret edict was enough to pass off as genuine. Of course, to a certain extent, this secret edict was indeed genuine. He also wrote a secret letter to inform Dongfang Muxue in the Forbidden City, so that when Songgotu returned to the capital, both sides' statements would not be able to match and would be exposed. This secret letter was written in code, so there was no corresponding secret key. Even if it was intercepted, nothing would be revealed. Song Qingshu came from the later generations, so he had a lot of experience in this area. After sending the two secret letters to their respective channels, Song Qingshu leisurely hurried back to the Daotai Yamen. He did not know that in the courtyard of the Daotai Yamen, Lu Guining and his wife were quarreling to the skies. What do I have to do to make you believe me? Looking at her angry husband, tears of grievance welled up in Miss Cheng's eyes. Lu Guining was lying on the bed, sneering again and again, but he did not say anything. Miss Cheng felt bitter in her heart, but when she saw the wounds all over her husband's body and the thick bandages, her heart immediately softened. She walked over and pulled his sleeve. In a soft voice, she said, Guining, let's not quarrel anymore. Let's make up. Lu Guining's complexion was gloomy. Suddenly, he said, If you want to make up, that's fine. But first you have to promise me one thing. Miss Cheng's heart was filled with joy. She could not help but smile. Not to mention one thing. Even if it's 10 or 100 things, as long as I can do it, I will definitely promise you. Of course you can do it. Lu Guaning gave his wife a meaningful look. Go and ask that person to help save Lord Han, Uncle Lu, and the others. Ah, Miss Chung looked embarrassed. Just saving you has already caused him to take a great risk. Moreover, I begged him bitterly before he reluctantly agreed. If I want to save Lord Han and the others, I'm afraid, begged. Lu Guaning's face twitched a few times. He sneered and said, his martial arts are so high. Saving them is as easy as turning his hand. What risk would there be? But after all, he is an official of the Jin Kingdom. He is an enemy of our great song. How could he be willing to save Lord Han and the others? Miss Chung did not know why, but she subconsciously spoke up for Song Qing-shu. At the same time, she did not reveal his true identity. From the standpoint of an official of the Jin Kingdom, he will indeed not save Lord Han and the others. Lu Guaning paused and suddenly stared at his wife meaningfully. But what if he does it for you? Miss Cheng's heart skipped a beat. She hurriedly asked, what do you mean? Lu Guaning lowered his eyes and said expressionlessly, later, go to his room. No matter what you do, you must make him agree to help. Miss Cheng's face turned pale. She subconsciously took a few steps back and looked at her husband in disbelief. Do you know what you're talking about? Of course I know. Lu Guaning's expression suddenly became ferocious. But what can I do? Our Lu family has already placed the fate of the entire family on Lord Han. If anything happens to him here, our Lu family will be completely finished. In the future, when Jia Sherdao and Shi Miyuan settle accounts, our Lu family will be doomed. The men will become slaves, and the women will be sent to the musical house. The Lu family of Mountain Yin will disappear in the long river of history in humiliation. But I am your wife. How can you let me do such a thing? Miss Chung murmured. Lu Guaning sneered and said, what do you mean by let you do such a thing? You say it as if you haven't done it before. What's the harm in doing it one more time? This was exactly what Lu Guaning was thinking. He thought that his wife had done something wrong to him. Since he couldn't change the fact that his wife had lost her virginity, he would take advantage of the situation and use his wife to save Han Xingzhou and the others to maximize the benefits. As a man, this kind of thing was a bit F*** up. But compared to the interests of the entire family, a wife was completely negligible. You. Miss Chung pointed at her husband. She was so angry that she couldn't speak. Lu Guaning knew his wife's character. He knew that she was shy and tender. If he pushed her too hard, it might backfire. So, he quickly said softly, Miss Chung, I was wrong before. In fact, what happened after we arrived in Yangzhou can't be blamed on you. I can only blame myself for not being able to protect you. But now that it has happened, we have to face it positively. You know that the honor of our Lu family is tied to Lord Han. If something happens to him, our whole family will suffer. At that time, as the daughter-in-law of the Lu family, you won't have a good ending. If you can save Lord Han this time, Lord Han will definitely repay our kindness, and our status in the clan will rise as well. Seeing that his wife had been silent, Lu Guaning continued, I will remember your sacrifice this time. When we return to Jiangnan, I will treat you twice as well. At that time, we can consider what happened in Yangzhou as a dream, okay? Chapter 1075. When Song Qing-shu returned to the Dao Tai Yaman's courtyard, it was already late. He specially invited Miss Chung and her husband to dinner. What surprised him was that Lu Guaning unexpectedly didn't mock or ridicule him during the meal. He just remained silent. Miss Chung also seemed to have her own thoughts. She was absent-minded the whole night. Young Master Lu, you don't have to worry. You can recuperate here during this time. There is no safer place in all of Yangzhou than here. Song Qing-shu put down his wine cup and said with a smile. Lu Guaning's expression changed several times. In the end, he cupped his hands and said, many thanks. Song Qing-shu raised his eyebrows. Lu Guaning's attitude was completely different from before. It was really a bit strange. He couldn't help but look at Miss Chung. He discovered that her face alternated between red and white. She only subconsciously moved her chopsticks. She seemed to be preoccupied. Strange. Song Qingshu frowned, but he quickly relaxed. Right now, he had too many things to consider. Naturally, he didn't have the energy to figure out the thoughts of this young couple. After the meal, Song Qingshu arranged for the couple to rest in different rooms. Then, he arranged for a group of doctors and maids to take care of Lu Guining. Miss Cheng's face was slightly red, but she took the initiative to take care of her husband. Song Qingshu couldn't help laughing. He knew that Miss Cheng was worried that he would take advantage of this opportunity to do something to her. He thought, am I so scary? Your husband is still here. However, he didn't stop her. After all, the two of them were husband and wife in name. Although there was a divorce agreement, they had been husband and wife for so many years. How could they break it just like that? After returning to his room, Song Qingshu kept thinking about the current situation in Yangzhou and the question of who Li Kashio would belong to. Unknowingly, it was already late at night. Suddenly, his heart stirred, and he raised his head to look at the door. Song, Prince Song, can I come in? Outside the door, there were a few soft knocks. Then, Miss Cheng's timid voice rang out. Please come in. Song Qingshu keenly sensed that her voice was faintly trembling. He felt it was strange. They had been together for so long. Why was she still so afraid of him? Actually, strictly speaking, Cheng Yaojia and Huang Rong were of the same generation. Fortunately, Song Qingshu was almost 30 years old, so the age gap between them was only a few years. Cheng Yaojia was a bit older, so she could be considered his older sister. However, because of her shy temperament and her delicate appearance, when the two of them were together, Song Qingshu treated her like a little sister. The door was quickly pushed open from the outside, and a dignified and gentle young woman leisurely walked in. She wore a plain long dress that made her look especially beautiful. Madam is so beautiful now. Song Qingshu couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. At the same time, his gaze fell on her steamy hair. It was obvious that she had just taken a bath. Wasn't I beautiful before? Miss Cheng raised her head and looked at him, her eyes sparkling. Song Qingshu was surprised by her boldness. At the same time, he noticed that she had closed the door. He couldn't help but smile and say, Madam, you didn't seem to drink at the banquet today. How come you seem to have become bolder? Miss Cheng's face turned red. She couldn't help but stamp her feet and say, You're making fun of me. All right, it's my fault. I apologize to Madam here. Song Qingshu deliberately bowed, making Miss Cheng giggle. I just don't know why Madam is looking for me so late at night. Can't I look for you if I don't have anything to do? Miss Cheng bit her lips and rolled her eyes at him. Of course you can. Whenever Madam wants to look for me, I will welcome you. As soon as Song Qingshu said this, he regretted it. This idiom was a bit ambiguous and could easily cause other people to misunderstand. However, this time he was being wronged. When he said it, he really didn't think about it in that way. Sure enough, Miss Cheng subconsciously glanced in the direction of the bed. Her small face suddenly blushed. Her full chest heaved up and down a few times. She suddenly said, I want to drink with you. I don't know if Gongzi will do me the honor. Song Qingshu was slightly startled. He felt that she was a bit strange today. However, he still smiled and said, It is my honor to drink with Madam. However, I have always been a big drinker. What if I make Madam drunk? Miss Cheng lowered her eyes and subconsciously bit her lips. Under the light, her lips shone with a charming luster. If I get drunk, I will get drunk. Song Qingshu was startled for a moment before he smiled. Since Foreign is in such a refined mood, this one will naturally accompany you. Finished speaking, he went to the door and called for a servant girl to bring over a pot of fine grape wine. Inside the room, Miss Cheng couldn't help but blush when she heard Song Qingshu instruct the maid to bring more wine. Now that he was a distinguished guest of the yamen, the maid didn't dare to neglect him. Before long, she brought the wine. Madam, please sit. Song Qingshu considerately moved the stool out for her and made a gesture to invite her to sit. Miss Cheng had never experienced the gentlemanly demeanor of the later generations. She suddenly felt flustered and blushed as she thanked him. Song Qingshu smiled and sat across from her. He poured a cup of wine for her and said, Let me toast, Madam. Who would have thought that Miss Cheng would shake her head and say, Gongzi has saved our lives. I should be the one to toast you first. Song Qingshu shook the wine pot next to him and laughed. There's still a lot of wine here. Madam can slowly toast me. Miss Chung pursed her lips and looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. Then what is the purpose of this toast? Song Qingshu carefully looked at her. Under the candlelight, Miss Cheng's cheeks were incomparably tender and beautiful. He couldn't help but exclaim, "The first toast is for Madam. You are more beautiful than a flower." Although she was depressed, Miss Cheng couldn't help but smile when she heard him praise her. "Very well, I will drink the first toast." She picked up the wine cup and was about to bring it to her mouth. Who would have thought that Song Qingshu would grab her wrist and say with a smile, "Madam, why are you so anxious? We haven't touched cups yet." Miss Cheng couldn't help but stick out her tongue. Tonight she had been absent-minded. No wonder she had made such a low-level mistake. She raised her wine cup and touched it with the other person's. Then she raised her head and drank the wine in one gulp. Looking at her slender, snow-white neck that slid slightly as she swallowed the wine, Song Qingshu suddenly felt that she was a feast for the eyes. He also drank the wine in one gulp. "Can you let go of my hand now?" After drinking the wine, Miss Cheng's eyes shone brighter than before. He didn't know if it was because she was drunk or because she was shy. Following her gaze, Song Qingshu realized that he was still holding her wrist. However, he was no longer a young boy, so he didn't feel guilty. He calmly let go and said with a smile, "I forgot. Madam, please don't take offense." As he spoke, he poured more wine for the two of them. "This second toast is for..." Miss Chung had just picked up her cup when Song Qingshu interrupted her. "Madam, I haven't finished toasting yet. I want to see what kind of title you will use this time." The corners of Miss Cheng's mouth rose slightly. She was drunk and gradually relaxed. "This second toast is for Madam's smooth skin," Song Qingshu said with a smile. "How can you toast like this?" Miss Cheng blushed and couldn't help but mutter, "Besides, how do you know if my skin is good or not?" Song Qingshu put his hand on her wrist and confidently said, "Because I touched it." Miss Cheng's heart jumped, and she couldn't help but softly scold, "Scoundrel!" However, her tone was coquettish and didn't contain any reproach. Seeing that Miss Chung obediently drank the wine, Song Qingshu raised his cup and said, "This third toast is for Madam." Miss Chung was immediately amused. "What? Are you out of words?" Song Qingshu suddenly remembered her expression when she stuck out her tongue. He couldn't help but smile and said, "This third toast is for Madam's cute little tongue." Miss Cheng's smile suddenly froze, and she suddenly stood up. Her skin from head to toe was dyed with a layer of red. Ew. Although the two of them had been somewhat ambiguous these days, she was still a well-educated and well-mannered young woman. Not to mention that her husband was next door. How could she withstand this kind of naked teasing? Who knew that Song Qingshu would pull her back and say, "Didn't Madam still want to toast me? Are you going to leave like this?" Thinking of her husband's request, Miss Chung faintly sighed in her heart. She sat down and drank the red wine in her cup. Seeing that Miss Chung was about to offer him a toast, Song Qingshu put his hand over the wine cup and said, "Madam, this cup of wine is extremely precious. Before we drink it, we should first settle some trivial matters. Only then will we be able to taste the beauty of this cup of wine." "What trivial matters?" Miss Cheng's heart jumped, and her expression was somewhat unnatural as she asked. Song Qingshu faintly smiled and said, "Young Master Lu is currently in the courtyard. Madam, instead of taking care of him, you came to my room in the middle of the night to drink wine. No matter how I think about it, it's not normal. Something must have happened." Miss Chung pursed her lips and turned her head away. "Can it be that I'm a fickle woman and wanted to seduce you in the middle of the night?" Song Qingshu shook his head and softly said, "After being together for so many days, how could I not understand Madam's temperament? Madam is such a dignified and virtuous woman who wholeheartedly thinks of her husband. If she were fickle, I'm afraid there would be no good women in the world." She didn't know why, but Song Qingshu's simple words warmed Miss Cheng's cold heart. His deep eyes made people feel an inexplicable sense of calmness. But the more it was like this, the more she couldn't help but think of how her husband treated her. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Song Qing-shu stretched out his finger to wipe the tears on her cheeks and softly said, "Did young Master Lu ask you to come?" Miss Chung looked at him in surprise. "You? How did you know?" Song Qing-shu didn't directly answer her. Instead, he said to himself with a sigh, "In the eyes of men in this world, women are really just accessories." Hearing him say this, Miss Cheng's tears couldn't stop flowing down. "Come with me." Song Qing-shu suddenly stood up and pulled her out. Miss Cheng couldn't help but follow behind him. She asked in a daze, "Where are we going?" Chapter 1076. Hearing Song Qing-shu's answer, Cheng Yaojia immediately shook her head and said, "No, I won't go." "Are you embarrassed?" Song Qing-shu laughed. Cheng Yaojia pursed her lips and turned her head away, not replying. Song Qing-shu sighed and said, "There are many things that have to be said clearly in front of him. Do you want to be wrongly accused?" Cheng Yaojia's expression softened, but she still hadn't made up her mind. Song Qing-shu didn't say anything and pulled her to the next room. Lu Guining was originally in the room feeling sad. Thinking about his wife running to find that man, his fists clenched and loosened. He didn't know what had happened and could only guess. However, the more he guessed, the more unbearable images appeared in his mind. When he thought of his gentle and shy wife moaning and moaning under another man, his face turned pale. Bang! The door to the room was suddenly kicked open. Lu Guining was shocked. He looked up and saw that the bearded man that he hated bitterly walk in. What are you doing here?" Lu Guining originally thought that the other party was in a gentle place. He didn't expect that he would appear here. "Madam, come in." Song Qing-shu turned his head and waved. Seeing Cheng Yaojia hesitating, he went over and pulled her in. "Yaojia?" Seeing his wife walk in with an awkward expression, Lu Guining suddenly thought of something, and his expression turned ugly. Cheng Yaojia's eyes flickered. She turned her head and didn't dare to look at her husband's eyes. Song Qing-shu coughed and stepped forward, saying, "Young Master Lu, I know you don't like me. In fact, I don't like you very much either, so let's get straight to the point." "What do you want to say?" Lu Guining snorted. There was an inexplicable hatred in his tone. Song Qing-shu didn't mind. He just pulled Cheng Yaojia in front of him and pressed her shoulder, saying, "I know there's a misunderstanding between you and your wife. To be precise, you misunderstood your wife. Originally, I didn't want to get involved in your matters. However, Yaojia is my friend, and I don't want her to suffer. So this time, I came here to solemnly tell you that before today, your wife did not do anything wrong to you. She is a well-educated and reasonable woman, not as unbearable as you think." Lu Guining snorted coldly and turned his head away. From his expression, it was obvious that he didn't believe it. Cheng Yaojia felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She could only tightly bite her lips and bitterly hold back the tears that were about to fall from her eyes. Song Qing-shu smiled. "Actually, it doesn't matter whether you believe me or not. I'm just letting you know in advance. Also, from today onwards, your misunderstanding is no longer a misunderstanding." Cheng Yaojia was startled and stared blankly at him. "What do you mean?" Lu Guining looked at him in confusion. "Because today, I am going to do the things you are imagining to Yaojia." Song Qing-shu's lips curled up slightly. Before Cheng Yaojia could react, he hugged her and kissed her. Woo-woo, Cheng Yaojia hit his chest with all her might. Unfortunately, her mouth was blocked, so she could only let out some meaningless whimpers. Lu Guining's face was ashen. He wanted to rush forward several times, but he didn't know what he was thinking and suddenly stopped. After a long time, their lips parted. Cheng Yaojia was so embarrassed that she turned her face away. She didn't dare to look at any of the men in the room. Song Qing-shu turned his head to Lu Guining and said, "Young Master Lu, I naturally won't disappoint you. You can rest assured that I will help you rescue Han Xingzhou and the others." After saying that, he picked up Cheng Yaojia's legs and carried her in his arms. He left, leaving behind a burst of unrestrained laughter. Lu Guining's face turned green and white. His nails almost dug into his palms. However, when he thought of the other party's last promise, he sighed as if he had accepted his fate. Song Qingshu carried Cheng Yaojia back to the room. Suddenly, he felt his chest become moist. He looked down and saw that the beautiful woman in his arms had tears streaming down her face. "Madam, do you blame me?" Song Qingshu put her on a stool and couldn't help but sigh. "Are you finally satisfied? Is this what you wanted to see?" Cheng Yaojia suddenly cried. Song Qingshu shook his head and said softly, "That's not what I want to see. In fact, I want to see young Master Lu launch an attack just now. Even if his martial arts are far inferior to mine, he still wants to show that he wants to protect you. As long as he said that, I would never have taken you away." "I don't believe it." Cheng Yaojia raised her head and stared into his eyes. "Yes, I really can't bear to part with you. In my heart, I prayed thousands of times to tell young Master Lu not to keep you. Fortunately, he didn't disappoint me in the end." Song Qingshu smiled. Cheng Yaojia's expression darkened. "You win. How can there be a winner or loser in a relationship?" Song Qingshu shook his head and comforted her. "Let's not talk about those unhappy things. Let's drink." "Okay, let's drink." Cheng Yaojia seemed to let go of everything, but her smile inevitably revealed a trace of bitterness. Song Qingshu filled their glasses with wine and said, "It seems that it's Madam's turn to toast me now." "Okay, I toast you." Cheng Yaojia's cheeks faintly showed a faint dimple. She held the wine glass with both hands and raised it in front of Song Qingshu. Who would have thought that Song Qingshu would say, "Madam, this toast is too insincere. I won't drink it." Cheng Yaojia unhappily rolled her eyes at him. "Then how do you want me to toast you?" Song Qingshu smiled and didn't directly answer. Instead, he said, "The ancient said that good grape wine is made of luminous cups. However, in my opinion, although luminous cups are good, they're not the best container for grape wine." Cheng Yaojia's attention was indeed attracted. She subconsciously asked, "Then what is the best container for grape wine?" Song Qingshu glanced at her tender red lips and replied, "Even the best wine will inevitably have a trace of sourness after being steamed and aged several times. Originally, the most suitable thing to dispel this sourness is sugar, but it's a pity that sugar is too crude and can't match the elegance of fine grape wine. However, there's another sweet thing that can dispel the sourness of grape wine and is not conventional at all." "What exactly is that thing?" Cheng Yaojia also came from a rich family, but she had never heard of this thing. She couldn't help but feel very curious. Her big eyes flickered. Perhaps it was because she had just cried, but now her eyes were exceptionally bright. The great scholar of the former Ming dynasty once said, "Taizun's first appearance, the frosty fat man's fluid, the newly cut treasure knife, the plump wu, the fragrant saliva of the hua qi, the sweet taste of the red palate." Song Qingshu faintly smiled. "In a mortal world, it is difficult to find the hua qi, but in my eyes, how can the fragrant saliva of the hua qi compare to the fragrant saliva of a beautiful woman? The fragrant saliva of a beautiful woman is incomparably sweet. It is the best thing to dispel the sourness of grape wine. Therefore, the red lips of a beautiful woman are the best containers for grape wine." As soon as Song Qingshu finished speaking, he looked at the beautiful woman in front of him with great interest. Cheng Yaojia's pretty face immediately turned red. The other party's words were so clear. How could she not understand the meaning behind his words? For a moment, she didn't know what to do. She could only continuously pull up the hem of her clothes. Obviously, her heart was in a mess. Seeing that she was unmoved, Song Qingshu couldn't help but sigh. "It seems that Madam's toast is not sincere at all. It's fine if you don't drink it." He then deliberately put the wine cup on the table. "Hey!" Cheng Yaojia hastily reached out to stop him. "Who said I'm not sincere?" However, noticing the playful look in his eyes, she was still somewhat embarrassed. "Can't you use another method? This is too embarrassing." Song Qingshu resolutely shook his head. "No, I will drink the wine that Madam offered me." "How can you be so overbearing?" Cheng Yaojia suddenly pouted coquettishly. "I'm overbearing like this." Song Qingshu looked at her with a burning gaze. Wherever the other party's gaze landed, Cheng Yaojia even faintly felt a kind of burning sensation on her skin. Suddenly, her mind was stirred up, and she unconsciously replied, "Fine, I'll toast you." As soon as she finished speaking, she drained the cup of red wine in one gulp. Then she got up and walked in front of Song Qing-shu. In the end, Cheng Yaojia wasn't so free and easy. For a moment, she was startled and didn't know what to do. There was a faint red wine stain on the corner of her lips. Under the candlelight, it formed a sharp contrast with her snow-white skin. She looked exceptionally attractive. Song Qing-shu knew that since things had come to this, he couldn't wait for her to take the initiative to offer the wine. He reached out and pulled Cheng Yaojia into his arms. Song Qing-shu lowered his head to look at her. Her pink face and rosy cheeks, especially the shyness between her eyebrows, made her look even more lovely. His heart was moved. He leaned over to her lips and licked the wine stain clean. Cheng Yaojia's almond-shaped eyes suddenly widened. Feeling the other party's warm tongue, her whole body couldn't help but tremble. Gulp, Cheng Yaojia's mind was agitated. Her snow-white neck moved up and down. The sound of her swallowing was extremely obvious in the quiet room. I swallowed it. Cheng Yaojia suddenly felt extremely embarrassed. She wished that there was a hole in the ground and she could crawl into it. "It doesn't matter. I'll feed you." Song Qing-shu grabbed the wine pot on the table and drank a few mouthfuls. Then he directly kissed her red lips. Cheng Yaojia subconsciously wanted to push him away, but she didn't know why her hand suddenly lost its strength. She just quietly held onto his clothes, letting him open her mouth and pour the sweet grape wine in her mouth. After an unknown amount of time, the wine had already been drunk. Song Qing-shu wantonly tasted her sweet and soft lips. For a moment, he was reluctant to part. Smelling the elegant fragrance coming from her body, Song Qing-shu's breathing also became heavy, and a pair of large hands unconsciously reached into her clothes. "No," Cheng Yaojia hurriedly pressed his hands down. She noticed his startled expression and suddenly lowered her head shyly. I still want to drink a little more wine." "You want to use wine to boost your courage?" Song Qing-shu didn't say this out loud. Instead, he said, "Okay." So he picked up the wine cup and drank a few mouthfuls. Then he leaned over and kissed her soft lips. Previously, in the latest issue of Nutrition Express, a few Korean fitness beauties wanted to investigate how many minutes these veterans thought they could last. In the end, 70% of the people who chose the answer were, "If the four of you come at me together, I won't be afraid." The monk was speechless. Chapter 1077. Cheng Yaojia suddenly felt extremely embarrassed. She didn't want to drink because of this. She was afraid that he would misunderstand that she was inviting him to kiss her. Her heart immediately began to beat faster. However, when his lips touched hers, Cheng Yaojia subconsciously loosened her teeth, allowing his tongue to roughly enter her mouth. Just like this, the two of them unknowingly drank more than half a pot of grape wine. Her entire body suddenly became a bit dizzy. Her cheeks became red and her eyes became misty and alluring. "Madam, is it okay now?" At this moment, Song Qing-shu's eyes were incomparably clear as he looked at her. You only know how to tease me. I'm already in such a state, yet you still dare to ask me?" Cheng Yaojia grumbled coquettishly. Her tone was 30% drunk, 30% shy, and 30% bold. Song Qing-shu smiled maliciously and said, "If Madam doesn't personally say it, how would I know whether or not I misunderstood?" "You didn't misunderstand." Cheng Yaojia bit her lips and said word by word, "What do you mean by didn't misunderstand?" The playful expression on Song Qing-shu's face became even stronger. Cheng Yaojia felt her teeth itch. She wished she could get up and ruthlessly bite him. "It means that no matter what you want to do, I will not refuse. If I want to touch some places that I shouldn't touch, is that also okay?" Song Qing-shu's smile became even more strange. As soon as he spoke, his big hand stopped near her clothes. "Up to you." Cheng Yaojia turned her head away. He couldn't see the expression on her face, but it could be seen that her ears were completely red. Song Qing-shu felt that she was becoming more and more bashful. He couldn't help but lift her chin and kiss her heavily. Wu Cheng-yaojia felt that it was difficult to breathe, but she was reluctant to push him away. Although she was no longer a young girl, she had never experienced such a gentle kiss. At first, she was a bit stiff, but she quickly closed her eyes, leaving only her long eyelashes trembling. This person is really a scoundrel. Just now he deliberately asked me, but now his hand has already reached. Cheng Yaojia's pretty face turned red, but she was too lazy to care about him. She could only let him do whatever he wanted. Song Qing-shu was very experienced. It didn't take long for Miss Cheng to realize that she couldn't hold on any longer. A thought suddenly flashed through her mind. I wonder how many women this man has touched to have such an ability to torture people. Song Qing-shu was about to reach out and take off the mask on his face. Cheng Yaojia felt his movement and hurriedly stopped him. No, and Song Qing-shu looked at her in surprise. Why would she still refuse at this time? No, don't take it off. Cheng Yaojia's voice trembled. Why? Song Qing-shu was confused. Because Cheng Yaojia blushed and suddenly whispered, I like your current appearance better. Song Qing-shu suddenly had a strange look on his face. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He boasted that he was handsome, but in the end, he couldn't compare to the bearded Tang Kuobian. Speaking of Tang Kuobian, although his appearance was a bit rough, he seemed to be very popular with women. The number one beauty of the Jin Kingdom fell in love with him, and the number one beauty's younger sister also liked him. Now that he met Cheng Yaojia, she unexpectedly had a good impression of him. However, he quickly relaxed. After all, these days he had spent most of his time with her as Tang Kuobian. It was normal for her to have a good impression of him. Thinking of this, he immediately regained his confidence in his charm. Even if he didn't use his handsome face, he was still very charming. Since Madam likes this face, then use this face. Song Qing-shu's words made Cheng Yaojia so embarrassed that she directly buried herself in his arms. She didn't dare to look at him again. Unknowingly, Cheng Yaojia's clothes were half undone. Song Qing-shu stretched out his hand, and a faint smile appeared on his face. He moved closer to her ear and gently said, Madam seems to be ready to welcome me. Cheng Yaojia couldn't wait to bite him. She thought that this person was really hateful. He always teased her like this. However, at this time, her mood was completely aroused. She suddenly looked back at him boldly and gently bit her lip. Yes, do you want to come? Song Qing-shu felt a flame explode in his body. He directly got up and put her on the table next to him. On the table? Cheng Yaojia suddenly felt a little guilty. After all, she had always followed the rules. Even after getting married, she and her husband were intimate. How could she do it in this kind of absurd place? What? Madam doesn't like it. Song Qing-shu pressed his hand on the table and looked at her from a close distance. Cheng Yaojia subconsciously wanted to say that she didn't like it. However, when she thought about how her husband had chosen to let his wife seduce another man for the sake of the family's interests, a feeling of revenge suddenly rose in her heart. She raised her snow-white and round chin and said, I like it. Song Qing-shu leaned over and whispered in her ear, In fact, even if Madam doesn't like it, I will still want you here. I'm going to die, Cheng Yaojia sighed in her heart. She felt that she was completely controlled by him. This man's casual words, even his breath, could make her endlessly aroused. Tonight, you can do whatever you want. Cheng Yaojia could clearly feel that her voice was a bit different. It was a bit more flirtatious than usual. Song Qing-shu's breathing suddenly became heavy. He was like a hungry wolf pouncing on a lamb, waiting to be slaughtered in front of him. Not long after, the wine jug and wine glasses that had been swept to the edge of the table fell to the ground due to the continuous shaking of the table. Early the next morning, when Song Qing-shu held Cheng Yaojia's hand and went out, Lu Guaning was already waiting outside with dark circles under his eyes. When she saw her husband, Cheng Yaojia's body trembled and she subconsciously stopped walking. Song Qing-shu held her hand and softly comforted her. He has already written the divorce papers. You're no longer husband and wife. Furthermore, He made you do that kind of thing yesterday. You don't have to blame yourself. Song Qingshu's voice seemed to have a strange magical power. Cheng Yaojia's agitated mood slowly calmed down. When Lu Guining saw them come out, he hurriedly rushed over. He wanted to question Song Qingshu, but he was suddenly stunned by his wife's beauty. Although Cheng Yaojia was beautiful, because of her temperament, she always looked shy and timid. After coming to Yangzhou, all kinds of things happened frequently. There was always a faint trace of worry between her eyebrows. But now, the woman in front of him was glowing like a delicate and beautiful rose. Lu Guaning's heart suddenly felt a sharp pain. He finally believed that his wife had not lied to him before. She had not done anything to disgrace the family. This was because this kind of beauty would only appear after being nourished by the rain and dew. His wife had not shown this kind of special beauty before. When he thought of how he had personally pushed his wife into someone else's embrace, Lu Guaning's face turned green and white. However, it was too late to regret now. He could only hope that this sacrifice could be exchanged for the family's future. When are we going to save Sir Han? Lu Guining felt a bit guilty and didn't dare to look at his wife's eyes. He was filled with anger towards Song Qingshu. Song Qingshu lightly replied, I promised to help you save Han Zhou and the others, but I didn't say immediately. Lu Guining was shocked and angry. He pointed at him and shouted, Do you want to renege on your promise? Song Qingshu's expression turned cold. First, whether or not to save them is up to me. You'd better be polite to me. Second, the reason why I agreed to save Han Zhou and the others was only because of Cheng Yaojia's face. Even if I want to renege on my promise, I will renege on her. I don't owe you anything. Third, we are going out for a walk. Please get out of the way. You. Lu Guining was already angry. When he heard this, he rushed forward. However, he seemed to hit an invisible wall. He staggered back a few steps before stabilizing himself. Only then did he remember that the difference in their martial arts was like heaven and earth. His face suddenly turned green and white. Seeing that her husband had been knocked down, Cheng Yaojia subconsciously wanted to help him up. Song Qingshu shook his head. Don't worry, I didn't hurt him. When she saw that Lu Guining was not seriously injured, Cheng Yaojia let out a sigh of relief. At the same time, she couldn't help but be angry at herself for not living up to expectations. She actually cared about this man. If you want to go for a walk, go by yourself. Leave my wife here. I have something to say to her. Lu Guining had no other choice but to try to persuade him. Your wife. Song Qingshu raised his eyebrows. He took out a handkerchief from his bosom and shook it in front of him. You wrote this divorce letter clearly. You have nothing to do with Cheng Yaojia anymore. Don't call her your wife. Lu Guining was anxious and immediately blurted out. That was just a moment of impulse. It can't be taken seriously. Song Qingshu took back the divorce letter and smiled disdainfully. Unfortunately, there is no medicine for regret in this world. Seeing that Song Qingshu couldn't do it, Lu Guining had to summon up his courage and look at his wife. Cheng Yaojia, don't you think about our many years of marriage? Cheng Yaojia's face turned pale. She said lightly, When you misunderstood me and insulted me, did you think about our marriage? In fact, I can endure all of this. But later, you know what you made me do. Are you still worthy of being a husband? I know I was wrong before. I will use the rest of my life to make up for it. Before Lu Guining could finish, Cheng Yaojia interrupted him. What's the point of saying this now? Lu Guining was speechless. Let's go. Cheng Yaojia took the initiative to hold Song Qingshu's hand. Lu Guining's face darkened to the extreme as he watched the two of them leave. He suddenly heard the moaning and singing from next door last night. He could no longer hold back the anger in his heart as he scolded. You fickle woman! Last time when you were with me, I didn't see you make a sound at all. Now you're so slutty when you're with other men. Song Qingshu's face turned cold. He was about to teach him a lesson when Cheng Yaojia grabbed his arm tightly. Don't. Chapter 1078. Hearing his words, Lu Guining's face immediately swelled to the color of a pig's liver. He wanted to refute, But he suddenly remembered Cheng Yaojia's sobbing voice from next door last night. He suddenly lost his confidence. What's more, the battlefield was with his wife. No matter who won or lost, he would be the biggest loser. Seeing that he was standing there in a daze, Song Qingshu pulled Miss Cheng's hand and walked out. Miss Cheng's body trembled and she looked hesitant. However, she quickly let him lead her away. Where are we going now? After leaving the yamen, Cheng Yaojia suddenly relaxed and couldn't help but ask the man who was holding her hand to see someone. Song Qingshu smiled mysteriously. No matter how many times she asked, he just smiled and didn't say anything. When they arrived at a secluded courtyard, Cheng Yaojia saw the person sitting calmly on the fishing platform. She realized that the person they were going to see was the real ruler of Yangzhou, Li Kaxiu. Could it be that Li Kaxiu has secretly sided with the Golden Snake Camp? Cheng Yaojia was secretly surprised. As a member of the Southern Song delegation, she had seen Li Kaxiu once. Naturally, she recognized him. In addition, she was influenced by the delegation, so she knew a little about the current situation in Yangzhou. Previously, neither the Southern Song nor the Mongolians regarded the Golden Snake Camp as an opponent. After all, Li Kaxiu controlled the territory of Jianghuai and the Golden Snake Camp. He also had 100,000 Green Camp troops under his command. His strength was slightly stronger than the Golden Snake Camp. Therefore, all parties subconsciously thought that it was impossible for him to side with the Golden Snake Camp. But looking at the current situation, Cheng Yaojia suddenly sighed. What did this have to do with her? In any case, her relationship with her husband was already like that. Not only was Cheng Yaojia shocked, but Li Kaxiu was also startled. If Cheng Yaojia could recognize him, how could he not recognize her? He still vaguely remembered that she was a member of the Southern Song delegation. How could he not be surprised? The current situation in Yangzhou was delicate. Seeing the Southern Song delegation and Song Qingshu together, he couldn't help but think of more things. Noticing his frightened expression, Song Qingshu faintly smiled and said, "Uncle Li, you don't have to worry. She is one of my people." He deliberately brought Miss Cheng here to achieve this purpose. When Cheng Yaojia heard Song Qingshu say that she was his woman, her face turned red. She didn't know what to feel. After all, she was the daughter-in-law of the Liu family, and Li Kaxiu knew this. Li Kaxiu nodded slightly and stopped thinking about Cheng Yaojia's matter. Her attention returned to Song Qingshu. "Nephew Song, why did you ask me out so soon?" Song Qingshu smiled. "Didn't I say that to Uncle Li before? We should be able to see the results today." So fast. Li Kaxiu's brows knit together tightly, while his face was covered in disbelief. After all, he'd only been acting perfunctorily earlier because he didn't believe that Song Qingshu could affect the higher echelons of the gold and pure sex at all. Li Kaxiu was skeptical. He called over one of his subordinates and asked. Then he said snappily, "Nephew, are you here to have fun?" The Jin and Qing envoys are clearly still in the yamen. Song Qingshu took a sip of tea and said unhurriedly, "Uncle Li, why are you in such a hurry? How about we play a game of chess first?" Seeing his confident appearance, Li Kaxiu couldn't help but waver in his previous judgment. He hesitated for a moment and said with a smile, "All right, I'll play with nephew." His subordinates had already set up the chessboard and the two of them began to play. Miss Cheng, who was standing to the side, felt very awkward. However, after watching the two of them play for a while, she nearly laughed out loud. The two of them had been so formal that she had thought they were both chess masters. Who knew that after watching for a while, Miss Cheng would realize that Song Qingshu's chess skills were even better than hers. During this period of time, in her heart, Song Qingshu was a high and mighty person who played with her like an ant. It was not until this moment that Miss Cheng realized that he was also an ordinary person. She immediately felt a lot more amiable. Fortunately, Li Kaxiu was also a bad chess player. The two of them were really evenly matched. This time, they really played until the sky turned dark and the earth turned dark. Ha ha ha, I haven't been so happy in a long time. Although Li Kaxiu was known as a Confucian general, his skills were mostly in the army. Although he was not completely ignorant of the four arts, his level was still very limited. In the past, when he played chess, he was either completely defeated or his opponents were afraid of his power and deliberately went easy on him. How could he be as happy as today? The more he looked at Song Qingshu, the more he liked him. After an unknown period of time, one of Li Keqiu's subordinates ran over and whispered something in his ear. He was so shocked that he immediately stood up and said, "Did you see clearly?" The subordinate nodded and said with certainty, "Not long ago, the Qing Kingdom's diplomatic corps left the Xingyuan. I followed them all the way and saw them leave the city gate." Li Keqiu glanced at Song Qingshu. Seeing that his expression was as usual, he suddenly felt that he was unfathomable. Thinking of another matter, he hurriedly turned his head and asked his subordinate, "What about the Jin Kingdom's diplomatic corps?" "We haven't seen any movement from the Jin Kingdom's diplomatic corps. When we saw that the Qing Kingdom's diplomatic corps had left, we quietly asked the Yamen's people to investigate. We found that the Jin Kingdom's diplomatic corps had already left. It seemed that they left in a hurry. A person was left in the courtyard, cursing Tang Kuo-bien." The subordinate replied, "What?" Cheng Yaojia looked at Song Qingshu in surprise. She didn't know that the Jin Kingdom's diplomatic corps would leave today. From what Song Qingshu said, the person who cursed Tang Kuo-bien must be her husband, Lu Guaning. Song Qingshu quietly patted Miss Cheng's hand and used the secret voice-sending technique to say, "I'll explain it to you later." This was indeed his arrangement. Before this, he had secretly moved Zhang Hongfan away. He was waiting for his father to pay the huge ransom. In addition, his subordinates had also been quietly informed. After he left with Miss Cheng, everyone quietly left. By the time Lu Guaning reacted, everyone had already left. Miss Cheng's character was originally soft. Hearing him say this, she had no choice but to suppress her doubts and silently stand to the side. "Nephew, you have made me have a whole new level of respect for you today." Li Keqiu looked at him with a complicated expression. Song Qingshu smiled and said, "You flatter me. It's fine as long as Uncle Li remembers his previous promise." Hearing him mention this matter, Li Keqiu's expression changed, but she quickly recovered. She laughed and said, "Of course." Then he paused and gave Cheng Yaojia a meaningful look. Then he said to Song Qingshu, "However, I have a matter that I would like to trouble you with." Speaking to this point, he closed his mouth. Song Qingshu knew what he meant. Perhaps he was still worried about Miss Cheng's identity as a member of the Southern Song Dynasty's diplomatic corps. In addition, he didn't want her to know too many secrets, so he said to her, "Miss Cheng, wait for me outside." Miss Cheng was already preoccupied with her husband's matter. In addition, she had no interest in these state affairs. Hearing this, she nodded and left without any objections. Watching her figure disappear at the door, Li Keqiu looked at him playfully and said, "Nephew is really resourceful. Not only can you influence the court situation of the Jin and Qin kingdoms, but now you even have people in the Southern Song Dynasty's diplomatic corps." Song Qingshu was happy that he misunderstood and didn't explain. He just smiled and said, "I don't know what Uncle Li is worried about. It's like this." Li Keqiu paused, as if thinking about how to phrase it. "I can bring the Jianghuai region to join the Golden Snake Battalion. But what will I get? The hereditary Iron Hat King." Song Qingshu's answer was also very simple. "If the world is unified in the future, your Li family will enjoy the glory of the empire for generations." Li Keqiu suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. This promise was really big. Due to historical reasons, the Han Empire rarely conferred the title of king. The Southern Song dynasty was slightly better in this regard. However, the title of king was only an honor and didn't have any real power. In contrast, the Manchurian Qing was much more generous in this regard. All kinds of king titles were given to the surrendered warlords as if they were free. This stimulated the group of warlords to work for them with red eyes. This was how they were able to sweep the rivers and mountains of the Ming dynasty in a short period of time with tens of thousands of bannermen. However, no matter how generous the Manchurian Qing was, they only conferred ordinary king titles. There were only 8 Iron Hat Kings, all of whom were the sons and nephews of Narachi. Moreover, They had made great achievements in the war to unify the world. The reason why the Iron Hat King was so rare was that the title was usually given for life. After your death, the title would be taken back by the imperial court and your descendants couldn't inherit it. There was another kind of title that could be inherited, but every time the title was inherited, the title would be reduced by one level. After a few generations, the title could only become the lowest level. However, the Iron Hat King had a special characteristic. It was hereditary. No matter how many generations you passed, your title would not change. Song Qingshu came from the later generations and naturally learned the experience and lessons of the previous dynasties. Therefore, he was extremely generous at the beginning. Even if there were any problems in the future, he could imitate the way the Qing dynasty dealt with the surrendered warlords in the future. Although Song Qingshu's promise was suspicious of painting a picture, it still made Li Ka-xiu extremely tempted. Because he knew that whether it was in the Qing dynasty, Mongolia, or the Southern Song dynasty, he would never be able to obtain a hereditary title. "My dear nephew is really generous," Li Ka-xiu said with emotion. "But I still need a promise. Please speak." Song Qingshu's expression turned serious. "In the future, you must give the position of empress to Yuanji," Li Ka-xiu said in a low voice. As long as his daughter became empress, then his grandson would be the crown prince in the future. Then the whole country would belong to the Li family. For such a great benefit, it was worth it for him to take such a big risk. He abandoned Mongolia and the Southern Song dynasty and chose the weakest Golden Snake camp. Song Qingshu raised his eyebrows and finally said slowly, "Everyone in the world knows that I already have a wife. She is the head of the Amei faction, Zhou Zhua. In addition, we have a very good relationship. In the future, the position of empress should belong to her. I don't want to lie to Uncle Li, but I can promise that in the future, the position of imperial consort will definitely belong to your daughter." Chapter 1079. Thinking of Zhou Zhiruo's beautiful face, Song Qingshu's heart gradually felt warm. Then he said to Li Ka-xiu, "Feelings can't be calculated like this. Of course, if Uncle Li insists on the position of empress, I can agree. But have you forgotten what happened to Lu Xiu and Guo Shangtong?" Li Ka-xiu's expression suddenly changed. How could he not know about this past? Back then, the founding emperor of the Eastern Han dynasty, Lu Xiu, loved his wife, Yin Lihua. However, in exchange for the support of King Jinding's 100,000 troops, he had no choice but to marry King Jinding's granddaughter, Guo Shangtong, and make her his empress. However, Lu Xiu had always loved Yin Lihua. In addition, because of this matter, he was full of guilt towards Yin Lihua and had always wanted to make it up to her. In the end, Guo Shangtong was crippled and King Jinding's family was almost exterminated because of the rebellion. The meaning of Song Qingshu's words was also very clear. "Don't force me. If you force me, I could be like Lu Xiu and promise you first, then burn the bridge after crossing the river. In that case, nephew, think about it carefully. Contact me when you have made up your mind." Li Ka-xiu stood up with a look of displeasure on his face. After leaving these words, he swaggered away. Song Qingshu smiled bitterly. In fact, he had a more tactful way. However, for the sake of the future, he didn't want to lie and deceive Li Ka-xiu. Also, he didn't know why he suddenly became a hipster. Was it because Zhou Zhiruo was involved? Song Qingshu suddenly fell into deep thought. Outside, Miss Chung saw Li Ka-xiu and the others coming out. She couldn't help but walk in with a puzzled expression. Did it not succeed? She didn't know what they were talking about, but looking at Li Ka-xiu's expression when he went out, it was obvious that the conversation wasn't pleasant. A little bit. Song Qingshu sighed in his heart. According to the more recognized standards of society in his previous life, there was no difference between a little bit and a lot of difference. For example, two entrepreneurial advertising companies A and B did a very good job on a certain project. However, Party A felt that Party B might be a little bit worse than Party A. In the end, Party A won the bid. For Party B, although it was only a little bit, it had already lost everything. "Let's go. Accompany me for a walk." Song Qingshu let out a long breath and pulled Miss Ching out. After spending some time together, Cheng Yaojia was already used to his intimate touch. Her face turned slightly red as she followed behind him. Along the way, Song Qingshu remained silent. Miss Cheng hesitated for a long time and finally plucked up her courage to ask, "Well, why did the Jin Kingdom's diplomatic corps leave?" Song Qingshu looked back at her. Her fair and rosy face was extremely cute and attractive. He couldn't help but pinch her cheek. "You want to ask how Lu Guaning is, right?" Cheng Yaojia turned her face away in embarrassment. Although every inch of her body was no longer a secret to Song Qingshu, such an intimate action in broad daylight on the street still made her feel a little guilty. "Don't worry, no one will make things difficult for him. This is just a small lesson for him," Song Qingshu said lightly. Previously, he had been scolded several times by the other party. Although he couldn't do anything to him because of Miss Cheng, he could still give him a small punishment. "Oh," Miss Cheng let out a sigh of relief. After spending some time together, she believed that the other party would not lie to her in this aspect. Song Qingshu suddenly reached out and wrapped his arms around her waist. He pulled her into his arms and looked down at her. "What do you plan to do in the future?" Miss Cheng was startled by his sudden action and subconsciously looked around with a guilty conscience. "Do you plan to continue to follow young Master Lu as a good wife and loving mother? Or do you have other plans?" Song Qingshu asked. "A good wife and loving mother?" Miss Cheng smiled bitterly. "Do I still live up to these words? A good wife has done such a thing with you. How can I be considered a good wife? A good mother? I have been married to him for so long, but we have no children. My mother-in-law has always complained about this matter. How can I be considered a good mother?" Song Qingshu leaned over and gently bit her ear. He said with a smile, "I personally experienced it last night. There is absolutely no problem with your body. It should be young Master Lu's problem that you don't have children. If you want to deal with your mother-in-law, how about I work a few more times and give you a son?" "How will you give him?" Miss Cheng asked in confusion. Then she realized what he meant, and her face suddenly turned red. She could not help but pout coquettishly. "You're so annoying. You're so naughty. Let go of my wife." At this moment, an angry shout suddenly came from not far away. Miss Cheng's face suddenly turned pale. Song Qingshu turned his head and found that Lu Guaning was staring at them with red eyes. Lu Guaning was suffering alone in his room because of what happened last night. It was not until the people from the Yamen came to clean the room that he found that the Jin Kingdom's diplomatic corps had all left. He suddenly felt that he had suffered a double loss. Although what happened last night was painful for him, as long as he could save Han Zhuozhou and the others, this sacrifice was completely acceptable. But when he saw that the Jin Kingdom's diplomatic corps was empty, he suddenly felt that he had been cheated. When he thought that his wife had been fooled, he was furious. Disregarding his injuries, he carried his saber and searched the streets for the Jin people. However, the Jin Kingdom's diplomatic corps had already left the city. How could he find them? The more he couldn't find them, the more aggrieved he felt and the more furious he became. At this moment, he suddenly saw Miss Cheng not far away. He was pleasantly surprised, but couldn't help but become angry because his wife was not alone at this time. She was shyly held in the arms of a young man. Because of Tang Kuo's argument, he felt that he had been cheated on. Now that another man had appeared, he suddenly felt that there was a grassland on his head. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. He rushed over with his saber and fiercely stabbed the two of them. He wished he could kill this adulterous couple with one stab. Song Qingshu protected Miss Cheng with one hand and easily caught Lu Guaning's saber with the other. He coldly said, "Young Master Lu, is this how you treat the benefactor who saved your wife?" Not only was Lu Guaning confused, but Miss Cheng was also dumbfounded. She looked at the man beside her in a daze, not knowing what he was up to. "What do you mean?" Lu Guaning used all his strength to pull the saber back. He found that it wouldn't budge, so he could only stare at him and ask. "Today I saw your wife being escorted by several Jin people, so I saved her. I heard from her that you were also imprisoned by the Jin people, so I came to rescue you. Who would have thought that you would attack me with a saber?" Song Qingshu spoke neither too fast nor too slow. Miss Chung admired him for being able to come up with such a seamless lie in such a short time. Is that true? Lu Guining looked at his wife skeptically. Miss Chung blushed slightly. She didn't know why, but she subconsciously followed Song Qingshu's words and said, "Yes, it was this young master who saved me." She felt slightly guilty in her heart. After all, it wasn't good for her husband to be deceived by an outsider. However, when she thought about how her husband had forced her to do such a thing, it wasn't something a husband should do. She immediately felt relieved. Moreover, she wasn't lying. These days, Song Qingshu had indeed saved her many times. Lu Guining hurriedly withdrew his saber and said to Song Qingshu apologetically, "I'm really sorry. I'm misunderstood, benefactor. May I ask benefactor's name?" "I am Song Qingshu of the Golden Snake Camp." Song Qingshu's attitude toward him had changed from Tang Quobian's previous attitude toward him. He became much more modest and polite. "You are the Golden Snake King, Song Qingshu?" Lu Guining's face revealed a shocked expression. "I have long heard of your prestige. I have always admired you. Now that I am able to meet you in person, is truly a blessing of 3 lifetimes." When Miss Chung, who was standing to the side, heard her husband's words, she suddenly had a strange expression. She thought, if you knew that the person who ran wild on your wife last night was this person, I don't know if you would still feel lucky. Returning Cloud Manor's young Master Lu's righteousness reaches the clouds. "I also greatly admire you." Song Qingshu faintly smiled. Lu Guining's face heated up. He thought that his reputation was nothing compared to Song Qingshu's. Although he knew that Song Qingshu was just being polite, he was still somewhat happy. "How does Prince Song know me?" Lu Guining suddenly realized something. His expression couldn't help but change as he stared at Song Qingshu. Miss Cheng's body trembled when she heard this. Her heart was in her throat. She looked at the man beside her with a worried expression. "If the Golden Snake Camp wants to establish a foothold in the world, we must have the ability to gather information," Song Qingshu calmly said. Lu Guining was startled. He no longer had any doubts. Nowadays, all the heroes of the world were rising. Each power was vigorously cultivating intelligence agencies. As an overlord, it was not surprising that Song Qingshu knew information about him. Miss Ching also let out a sigh of relief. She gently bit her lips and blushed. She thought that this man really didn't even blink when he lied. "I don't know why Prince Song came to Yangzhou this time." Lu Guining probed. "Not long ago, I had a dream that I would meet a fated person in Yangzhou. Therefore, I deliberately came here to relax." Song Qingshu calmly looked at Miss Chung as he spoke. Miss Cheng's heart swayed under his gaze. She subconsciously glanced at her husband. Seeing that he wasn't paying attention to her, she relaxed and suddenly felt a strange sense of excitement. Lu Guining didn't notice the two of them exchanging glances. In his heart, he was thinking that Song Qingshu must have come for Li Keqiu. He was Song Qingshu's competitor. But when he thought about Han Xingzhou and the others being imprisoned, he became dejected. At this moment, he didn't care whether Song Qingshu was a competitor or not. When he thought about rescuing Han Xingzhou, his heart burned with anger. Tang Quobian, that bastard, had eaten his fill and left. He didn't keep his promise to rescue Han Xingzhou and the others. "Prince Song, I have something to say to my wife." "I don't know." Lu Guining was anxious to ask about Tang Quobian. He had no choice but to speak to Song Qingshu with an awkward expression. Chapter 1080. Miss Chung originally didn't want to talk to her husband, but after hearing Song Qingshu's words, she couldn't help but look at him with hidden bitterness. She reluctantly walked forward with her husband. "Miss Chung, did Tang Quobian say anything before he left?" Lu Guining still had a glimmer of hope in his heart. He hoped that Tang Quobian would keep his promise and make some arrangements before he left. "You didn't even ask me how I was, and the first thing you asked was about Tang Quobian." Miss Cheng's heart became colder. "Aren't you fine?" Lu Guining looked embarrassed and hurriedly said, "You can't let him play with you for nothing." Miss Chung frowned and interrupted him. "Your words are really unpleasant to hear." Lu Guining wanted to say something, but at this time, a sudden change occurred. The window of a nearby house exploded, and an old farmer ran out into the street in a panic. "How can you walk?" Lu Guiying was in a bad mood, so he couldn't help but run a few steps forward and curse at the old farmer's back. "Get lost!" At this time, an angry shout suddenly came from behind him. Lu Guiying didn't have time to react before he felt a sharp pain in his waist. Then his whole body flew to the side like a broken sandbag. "Guiying!" Miss Chung cried out in alarm and hurriedly ran over to help her husband up. Although she now treated her husband coldly, the two of them had been treating each other with respect for many years, so they still had some feelings for each other. Seeing her husband's mouth full of blood, Miss Chung suddenly felt a deep sense of powerlessness in her body, making her hands and feet cold. She suddenly thought of Song Qing-shu and suddenly felt like a drowning person grabbing a life-saving straw. She hurriedly looked back at him and said, "Young master." Song Qing-shu's figure flashed and appeared by her side. He looked at Lu Guiying's condition and couldn't help but frown. Lu Guiying was already injured and had been kicked in the waist by an expert. At this moment, he was already half a step into the gates of hell. "I beg you, save him." Miss Chung pulled his hand, her eyes full of pleading. "I'll try." Song Qing-shu arrived behind Lu Guiying and continuously poured his internal force into his body. Finally, Lu Guiying's face had some color. "I've stabilized his condition, but I don't know if I can save his life. We'll only know when the doctor comes." In fact, Song Qing-shu was sure that Lu Guiying's life was saved. However, he was kicked in the back of his waist, and his kidney was injured. He might not be able to live in the future. Therefore, Song Qing-shu deliberately said that his situation was not optimistic, so that they would be satisfied if he could save his life in the end. If Song Qing-shu told them that his life was saved, they might even suspect that it was their doing when they found out that he could not have sex. Then, they would resent him. It had been like this since ancient times. The reason why Song Qing-shu was able to see through people's minds so clearly was not because he was extraordinarily intelligent, but because he came from an era of information explosion and had a lot of experience from his predecessors. "Thank you, Prince Song." As expected, Lu Guiying's tone was filled with gratitude. Song Qing-shu nodded slightly, and then looked up to see the situation of the people who were chasing him. The old farmer who had been running in front had been intercepted, and a middle-aged man and a graceful girl were besieging him. The middle-aged man was the one who had kicked Lu Guiying. Although he was already in his middle years, he could still vaguely see that he was a handsome man when he was young. However, there was a faint trace of ruthlessness in his eyes, making people feel uncomfortable. The girl was tall, and her clothes revealed her curvaceous body. Her movements were full of youthful vigor, especially her two long legs, which were unforgettable. "It's her." Seeing that pair of slender legs, Song Qing-shu immediately recognized that she was Yelu Nancian. He was curious about the middle-aged man beside her, but he was even more curious about why they were besieging the old farmer. From his appearance, the old farmer looked exactly like a farmer from the countryside. If he hadn't revealed his extraordinary martial arts, even Song Qing-shu would have been fooled by him. The old farmer's martial arts were very strange, often attacking from unimaginable angles. Every move and every stance exuded an eerie, ghostly aura, causing Yelu Nancian and the middle-aged man to feel apprehensive. No wonder they're attacking together. Song Qing-shu nodded to himself. He was very clear about Yelu Nancian's martial arts. Among the younger generation, she was definitely one of the best. Even if she ran into some senior masters, she wouldn't be at a disadvantage. Of course, if she ran into the 5 uniques, she still wouldn't be able to handle them. That middle-aged man's martial arts seemed to be above Yelu Nancian's, requiring 2 first-rate masters to attack together. It was clear how high the old farmer's martial arts were. However, Song Qing-shu suddenly frowned. With his cultivation, he quickly noticed something was wrong. Although the old farmer's swordsmanship was strange, it seemed like he had just learned it not long ago. When he used it, he didn't have a complete understanding of it. Often, he noticed that the old farmer's moves had some problems connecting them, causing him to lose an opportunity to win the battle. "It's a repeat." Song Qing-shu said to himself. This was the second time the old farmer had used his swordsmanship. That middle-aged man's cultivation was profound. Quickly realizing this, his eyes brightened. Taking advantage of the moment the old farmer was busy dealing with Yelu Nansien, he suddenly appeared behind the old farmer, his fist landing heavily on the old farmer's back. PFFF, the old farmer coughed up a mouthful of blood, staggering forward as if he was drunk. At the same time, he swung his sword to protect his body, using a killing move that would take him down with his opponent. Seeing the outcome was already decided, the middle-aged man and Yelu Nansien involuntarily retreated one zhang, only faintly surrounding the old farmer. There was no need to fight him to the death at this time. Song Qing-shu shook his head and said to Cheng Yaojia, "Let's go, we'll take young Master Lu to find a doctor." He wasn't a saint. This kind of Jianghu feud happened every day. Moreover, he didn't know the grudge between the two sides, so how could he intervene? Of course, if the old farmer was a young and beautiful woman, maybe Song Qing-shu would change his mind. As for the middle-aged man injuring Lu Guanying, that was a grudge between the two of them. Him saving him was already giving face to Cheng Yaojia. How could he help him get revenge? Just now, Yelu Nansien and the others were busy running away and didn't notice what was happening. Now that they saw Song Qing-shu, the three of them had different expressions. Yelu Nanxian's eyes were filled with surprise and joy. The middle-aged man's eyes were filled with fear and malice. And the most puzzled one was the old farmer. His eyes were filled with ecstasy, and he suddenly rushed towards Song Qing-shu. The middle-aged man's expression changed, and he quickly chased after him. Yelu Nansien hesitated for a moment, then cooperated with him to stop him. Seeing that there was no hope of escaping, the old farmer suddenly shouted to Song Qing-shu, "Save me." Song Qing-shu's expression immediately changed because he recognized this voice. This person was Namlan's husband, Tian Guinong, who had been rescued from Shengjing. Previously, he had heard from Namlan that Tian Guinong had suddenly disappeared, so he had run here. Song Qing-shu immediately realized what sword technique Tian Guinong had just used. The Lin family's Bixia swordsmanship. No wonder his martial arts had advanced by leaps and bounds in such a short period of time. It was because he had practiced the Bixia swordsmanship manual. In addition, his experience in Shengjing had turned him into a eunuch, so the Bixia swordsmanship manual's greatest difficulty, to practice this sword technique, one must castrate oneself, was not a problem for him at all. Thus, this sinister sword technique seemed to be tailor-made for Tian Guinong. Song Qing-shu quickly realized that Tian Guinong must have heard him mention that the Bixia swordsmanship manual was in the Lin family's old residence in Sun-facing Alley. So when he had the opportunity, he secretly went to Fujin to steal the manual. Unfortunately, he had only practiced for a short period of time, and his tracks were exposed. In the end, he was seriously injured by the middle-aged man. In the blink of an eye, Song Qing-shu had analyzed the ins and outs of the entire matter. His figure flashed, and he appeared beside Tian Guinong. Then, he waved his hand and pushed Yelu Nansien, who was closest to him, back. Facing the middle-aged man, he wasn't so polite. Previously, the way he injured Lu Guanying was clearly sinister. Originally, this matter had nothing to do with Song Qing-shu, but since he wanted to stand up for his subordinate, he might as well do Miss Cheng and Lu Guanying a favor. Thus, he didn't show any mercy and decided to make the middle-aged man stay. The middle-aged man punched out. Song Qing-shu stretched out his finger and pointed at the man's fist. Before the two sides even made contact, the middle-aged man's fist blossomed with blood. Invisible sword chi. The middle-aged man snorted in shock, and then wisely chose to retreat at a faster speed than when he came. But how could Song Qing-shu let him escape like this? He took a step forward and followed him like a shadow. Then, he pointed at the middle-aged man's body. If he was hit by this move, even if he didn't die, he would be seriously injured. "Don't hurt my father." At this time, Yelu Nansien cried out, rushing out from the side with her sword in hand. This middle-aged man was Yelu Nanxian's father, Yelu Yisin. Hearing her cry, Song Qing-shu couldn't help but hesitate. His relationship with Yelu Nansien wasn't bad, If he seriously injured her father, wouldn't he offend her to death? At the end of the day, Yelu Isin didn't have any deep enmity with him. Whether it was Lu Guining or Tian Guinong, they weren't important to him. With this in mind, he held back a little. At this moment, a ruthless glint flashed across Yelu Isin's eyes. He grabbed his daughter and slammed her against Song Qingshu's finger. Song Qingshu was shocked and quickly retracted his strength. Unfortunately, it was too late. Yelu Nancian cried out in pain as a bright red flower of blood bloomed on her chest. Taking advantage of his distraction, Yelu Isin disappeared into the distance in a few leaps. Chapter 1081. I feel like my chest is very hot. Yelu Nancian's eyes were half closed as she weakly replied. Song Qingshu knew that she was hallucinating after being injured and hurriedly sealed the acupuncture points around her wound. Miss Nancian, you must not circulate your qi to heal yourself. Otherwise, the sword energy will damage your foundation. I will help you remove the sword energy. Thank you. Yelu Nancian's beautiful eyes were tightly closed, tears welling up in the corners of her eyes, not knowing if it was because of the pain or because she was sad that her father used her as a shield. Song Qingshu hurriedly transferred a strand of true energy into her body to control the sword energy, preventing it from wreaking havoc in her body. However, it would take time to remove it. Fortunately, in that critical moment, Song Qingshu sensed something was wrong, and not only did he withdraw most of his strength, he also avoided hitting her vitals. Otherwise, Yelu Nancian would probably be dead by now. Although she was heavily injured, as long as Song Qingshu removed the sword energy, she would be able to recuperate and her life wouldn't be in danger. Just as he finished controlling her internal injuries, Tian Guinong suddenly vomited a mouthful of black blood, causing Miss Chung to cry out in shock. Song. This person, holding Yelu Nancian in his arms, Song Qingshu, took a step forward and appeared next to Tian Guinong. Seeing how weak Tian Guinong was, Song Qingshu couldn't help but be shocked. Earlier, he saw Yelu Isin punch Tian Guinong in the back, but it shouldn't be life-threatening. That was why he saved Yelu Nancian first, but how did things end up like this? Seeing the pool of black blood on the ground, Song Qingshu's expression changed. Hurriedly pulling open Tian Guinong's clothes, he found a purple fist mark on his back. There's poison. Song Qingshu's expression finally changed. Even from so far away, he could smell the disgusting smell of the poison. It was clear that the poison was extremely potent. Reaching out to check Tian Guinong's pulse, Song Qingshu's expression sank. He could only do his best to transfer his true energy into Tian Guinong's body. Song, young master, is there no hope for me? Seeing his expression, Tian Guinong sighed. Song Qingshu was silent for a moment. In the end, he still told the truth. The poison has attacked the heart. Even if the almighty immortals came, they wouldn't be able to save him. In the end, I don't have that fate. Tian Guinong smiled bitterly. Young master, don't waste your qi anymore. I have something to tell you. After saying that, he glanced at Miss Chung and her husband. Her husband was injured because of this person. Chung Yaojia unhappily glared at him. However, it was not convenient for her to eavesdrop on his last words, so she helped her husband up and walked to the side. Song Qingshu didn't withdraw his true qi. You said it. My cultivation can still hold on. Although Tian Guinong was despicable in the original novel, he was still his subordinate in this world. Back then, he had even planned to form a group of villains, and Tian Guinong was one of them. Thus, as he watched his life slowly fade away, he felt exceptionally sad. Many thanks, young master. Feeling the steady flow of true qi into his body, Tian Guinong's originally cold heart couldn't help but warm up. He took out an old kasaya from his bosom. Last time, I found out the whereabouts of the Bishia swordplay manual from young master. I couldn't resist the temptation and secretly went to Fuzhou to retrieve it. Song Qingshu secretly sighed. Yu Buchuan, Zhuo Linchan, and Lin Pingji had schemed to find the Bishia swordplay manual. For this reason, they were suspicious of each other. Unexpectedly, It had fallen into Tian Guanong's hands. Gently stroking the Kasaya, Tian Guanong's eyes were filled with reluctance. The martial arts in this manual are really mysterious. I've only practiced it for a few months, but my martial arts have advanced by leaps and bounds. Unfortunately, I don't know how the news got out, but I was targeted by a mysterious person. I disguised myself along the way and thought of countless ways, but in the end, I was still caught in Yangzhou. Previously, he was dressed like an old farmer. Obviously, he had disguised himself. Now that the makeup on his face had fallen off, his original appearance was revealed. Song Qingshu was silent. He knew that the mysterious person he was talking about was Yelu Yisin. He was also puzzled. Yelu Yisin was the privy secretary of the southern courtyard of Liao. He had a high position and power. Why would he come here to meddle in the affairs of the martial world? This Bishia swordplay manual is not fated with me. I'll give it to young master. Tian Guanong stuffed the Kasaya in his hands into Song Qingshu's bosom. Song Qingshu frowned. He didn't take it. Instead, he said, "This is what you left behind. When the time comes, you can give it to your wife or Qingwen." The wife he was talking about was naturally Nanlong. Qingwen was Tian Guanong's daughter, Tian Qingwen. Tian Guanong chuckled. "This martial art is not suitable for women. Young master, you should keep it. I found it according to young master's guidance. Speaking of which, it should belong to young master." Song Qingshu laughed bitterly. The Bishia swordplay was indeed not suitable for women, but at the same time, it wasn't suitable for men either. The phrase, "if you wish to practice this divine martial art, you must castrate yourself," had caused many men to feel a chill in their crotches. Tian Guanong obviously wasn't in the mood to explain this to Song Qingshu. He stuffed the Kasaya into Song Qingshu's bosom. Then, he looked at the northern sky. His eyes gradually became lax. "Young master, I'll have to trouble you to take care of Nanlong and Qingwen in the future." Song Qingshu's heart stirred. He blurted out a famous saying from his previous life. "I will take care of your wife and daughter. You don't need to worry about them." A strange expression appeared on Tian Guanong's face, but he finally smiled. "That's good. That's good." Song Qingshu couldn't help but sigh when he saw Tian Guanong's eyes slowly close. He had been constantly transferring his real qi to Tian Guanong. How could he not know that Tian Guanong's life had been extinguished? Great master, great master. At this time, the Golden Dragon Gang's men who had been lying in ambush nearby ran out. "Great master, let's go quickly. The Qing Empire has received news that a group of soldiers are rushing over here." Song Qingshu slightly nodded. With his current status, it was indeed inconvenient for him to meet the Qing Empire's army. He immediately ordered the Golden Dragon Gang's men to take Tian Guanong's body away. Then, he helped Cheng Yaojia support Lu Guaning. He carried the unconscious Yelu Nanxian and returned to the Golden Dragon Gang's secret stronghold with them. "Where is your gang leader?" Song Qingshu couldn't help but ask after not seeing Jiao Weiner. "Gang leader has brought some people to Taizhou to handle some matters," the Golden Dragon Gang member replied. Song Qingshu nodded. Jiao Weiner was in charge of such a big business all by herself. She was indeed very busy. On the contrary, the boss was much more leisurely. "Go and order a good coffin. Then, deliver Tian Guanong's body to Yin Jing's Tian mansion and hand it over to Madame Tian. Also, help to bury him. Remember to give this letter to Madame Tian." Song Qingshu gave a secret letter to one of his subordinates. In the letter, he wrote down the general situation of the matter. He also comforted the mother and daughter with words of condolence. "Yes, great master. Because of the great victory against the Qing Empire, Song Qingshu's prestige in the Golden Snake Battalion was unparalleled. So, this subordinate was very excited to be able to do something for him. In addition, go to the city and find a highly skilled doctor to treat young Master Lu's injury. Don't worry about the cost. If it is useful, use any expensive medicinal herbs." Song Qingshu ordered. "All right." The subordinate felt strange. Why did the great master value Lu Guaning so much? Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly thought of something. "Don't we need to find a doctor to take a look at that girl?" Song Qingshu knew that he was talking about Yelu Nanxian. He shook his head and said, "No need. I will treat Yelu Nanxian." Yelu Nanxian was injured by his sword qi. If he didn't dissolve the sword qi in her body, no matter how skilled the doctor was, even if he could save her life, he wouldn't be able to save her. It should be known that revered Ming was a 1,000-years-old monster. When Ah Qing's innate sword qi entered his body, he tried countless ways to dissolve the sword qi in his body. Instead, his injuries became more and more serious. In the end, he could only go to the Blackwood Cliff to find the absorbing star's great technique. Only then was he able to get rid of Ah Qing's sword qi. After arranging everything, Song Qingshu returned to the room where Yelu Nanxian was. Seeing her frowning in a semi-conscious state, he immediately regretted it. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have used the sword qi. If he had used the solitary yang finger, she wouldn't be in so much pain. He didn't know why, but when he saw Yelu Yisin, he couldn't help but feel a murderous intent. They clearly didn't know each other before. Could it be because of Tian Guinon? That didn't seem likely. Song Qingshu shook his head, dispelling all the guesses in his mind. He helped Yelu Nanxian up to sit in front of him, then reached out his hand to undo her clothes. Throughout the process, Song Qingshu's eyes were crystal clear, without a trace of evil intent. He didn't need to deliberately take advantage of her, but because Yelu Nanxian's wound was on her chest, he couldn't treat the wound through her clothes. Fortunately, the wound caused by the sword qi was between her chest and collarbone, so he only needed to remove her clothes a few inches below her collarbone. If the wound was any lower, even if Song Qingshu didn't have any evil thoughts, the situation would inevitably be a little awkward. Reaching out his hand to press on her wound, Yelu Nanxian couldn't help but make a sound of agreement. Obviously, he had touched her sore spot. Song Qingshu's following movements became gentler and gentler, carefully dissolving the sword qi in her body. After dissolving the sword qi, Song Qingshu picked up a bouquet of little red flowers that he had prepared earlier. This little red flower had an interesting name called Little Red Lotus of the Buddha Throne. Not only did it reduce swelling, it also had a certain detoxifying effect, an excellent medicine for treating external injuries. Song Qingshu first crushed half of the little red flower and fed it to Yelu Nanxian, then placed the other half an inch away from her wound. Circulating his vigorous internal energy, he slowly forced the medicinal energy from the flower into her wound. About half an hour later, Yelu Nanxian woke up with a soft moan, asking a low voice, "Am I still alive?" Song Qingshu smiled faintly. "Originally you didn't want to live, but King Yama saw that a little girl like you is so beautiful, it would be a pity for you to die before getting married. So he told me to bring you back. Your mouth is always so sweet." Yelu Nanxian had known him for a long time. She had more or less gotten used to his way of speaking. Suddenly, she felt a slight chill on her chest. Looking down, she saw her smooth skin and couldn't help but be startled. "It was an emergency, so I took off my clothes to heal. I hope Miss Nanxian doesn't mind," Song Qingshu hurriedly explained. Yelu Nanxian's face flushed red for a moment. She confidently said, "Us grassland women are not as shy as you Han women. Not to mention you didn't reveal anything." "That's right." Song Qingshu regretfully smacked his lips. If only the wound was 2 inches deeper. Chapter 1082. No matter how open-minded Yelu Nanxian was, she was still a woman. How could she endure his teasing? Her face flushed red, glaring at him coldly. All right, Song Qingshu smiled. "Don't move, I'll be done in a while." Then he hurriedly focused his mind and continued to evaporate the medicinal energy. Yelu Nanxian grunted softly, not daring to look at him, acting like a little girl for the first time. After another half an hour, Song Qingshu finally forced all the medicinal power of the Buddha thrown little red lotus into her wound, and then he bandaged it for her. When Song Qingshu's fingertips accidentally touched her skin, Yelu Nanxian's body trembled, saying unnaturally, "I'll do it myself." Song Qingshu shook his head. Using an unquestionable tone, he said, How would it be convenient for you to do it yourself? If you move too much and cause the wound to tear, it'll be even more troublesome. All right. Yalu Nancian hesitated for a moment, but nodded in the end. In order to ease her nervousness, Song Qing-shu continued to bandage her wound while smiling. I didn't expect your skin to be so smooth and soft after spending all day on the prairie. Yalu Nancian blushed slightly, but she was more easygoing than most Han women. Raising her chin, she snorted. This miss was born beautiful. Are you not convinced? Song Qing-shu laughed out loud. As he tidied up her clothes, he said, I wonder which man will be lucky enough to be your son-in-law in the future. His wife is tall and graceful like a grassland woman and has the delicate skin of a Han woman. Yalu Nancian smiled sweetly. No matter who that man is, you have no chance, right? Song Qing-shu raised an eyebrow. Oh, why is that? Yalu Nancian snorted. Yalu Nancian's husband. Of course he has to treat me wholeheartedly. You've incurred so many debts of love. Only those silly women would be willing to follow you. Song Qing-shu shrugged his shoulders, not minding her words. No matter what, to be considered by the princess as a candidate for prince consort, this one is already honored. Yalu Nancian's face heated up. She couldn't help but whine. Who even considered you as a Fuma candidate? Song Qing-shu smiled and did not argue with her. Instead, he changed the topic and asked, Was it your father on the street? Hearing his words, Yalu Nancian's face darkened. She couldn't help but nod. And Song Qing-shu asked curiously, Since it's your father, why did he do that? Yalu Nancian knew he was referring to her father using her as a shield. She sighed and said faintly, I don't know either. What did you guys come to Yangzhou for this time? Seeing her blank expression, Song Qing-shu decided to change his way of asking. Nominally, it's to ask Li Kexio to surrender. But even I know that great Liao is struggling to survive in the cracks. How could Li Kexio surrender to us? Yalu Nancian shook her head. Later, I discovered that after we arrived in Yangzhou, Father didn't rush to make contact with Li Kexio. Instead, he kept an eye on the people passing through Yangzhou. I didn't know why at first, but now I think I understand. He came here to capture that person. Song Qing-shu knew that the person she was talking about was Tian Guino. It seemed that Yalu Isin's target was the Bixia swordbook. He didn't know how he knew it was in Tian Guino's hands. I don't know why these days I feel that Father has changed a bit, but his appearance and tone are still the same as before. Maybe I'm thinking too much. Yalu Nancian suddenly said. Song Qing-shu's heart skipped a beat. He looked into the distance thoughtfully. Is that so? Noticing the fatigue in Yalu Nancian's eyes, Song Qing-shu smiled at her and said, Rest well. We'll investigate this later. Yalu Nancian was indeed very tired. She let him hold her shoulders and lay down on the bed. Not long after, she fell asleep. Song Qing-shu covered her with a blanket and quietly closed the door. Not long after he left, he faintly heard a woman sobbing not far away. He followed the sound and found a young woman sitting in a pavilion in the depths of the forest, crying nonstop. Could it be that Madame saw me with another woman and became so sad because she was jealous? Song Qing-shu deliberately coughed and said with a smile. The young woman in front of him was naturally Cheng Yaojia. She raised her head and saw him. Her face turned red. She bit her lips and turned her face away. Gongzi is making fun of me again. Then why is Madame crying? Song Qing-shu walked over and sat down. His hand naturally held her hand and asked with a smile. Cheng Yaojia was startled. She didn't expect him to be so impudent. Wuji was scared. She looked around guiltily. Seeing that there was no one around, she quietly breathed a sigh of relief. Isn't it because of Guanyin? What happened to young Master Lu? Song Qing-shu vaguely guessed what was going on. Cheng Yaojia's face suddenly turned red. She hesitated for a moment before whispering. The doctor said that his kidney meridian was damaged. From now on, I'm afraid he can't. She couldn't finish her sentence. Can't sleep with Madam? Song Qing-shu casually said, although I really want to say my condolences to Madam, no matter how I look at it, this is good news for me. How can you be like this? Cheng Yaojia was extremely angry and immediately cupped her fists. I'm just saying something from the bottom of my heart. Song Qing-shu grabbed her hand. Seeing that she was frowning, he quickly changed the topic. Young Master Lu has suffered a great disaster. He must be in need of comfort. Why did Madam come alone and cry alone? Cheng Yaojia wanted to say something, but stopped. After a long time, she said, when Guaning found out about the result, his entire face immediately turned ashen. He didn't want the doctor to treat him and didn't listen to anyone's consolation. I was also driven out by him. I was worried that he would take things too hard. I was afraid that As she spoke, she began to cry again. Madam is his wife. At this moment, he certainly can't face you. Song Qing-shu pondered for a moment. How about this? I'll go and persuade young Master Lu. You'll go? Cheng Yaojia wiped the tears on her face. Her expression immediately revealed a strange expression. She thought that if he went, wouldn't it be adding oil to the fire? Looking at her expression, Song Qing-shu knew that she had misunderstood. He couldn't help but smile and say, Don't worry, I won't deliberately provoke young Master Lu. Unless Madam secretly tells him my identity, I have absolute confidence that I can make him pull himself together. I absolutely didn't speak nonsense. Cheng Yaojia hurriedly waved her hand. She didn't know why she didn't want her husband to know the true identity of Tang Quobian. Now that Tang Quobian had left, let that matter go with the wind. That's good. Song Qing-shu got up and said, Come with me to persuade young Master Lu. You quickly let go. Seeing that her husband's room was getting closer and closer, and that he was still holding her hand tightly, Cheng Yaojia suddenly panicked. Seeing her anxious face blushing, Song Qing-shu felt that it was exceptionally attractive. He couldn't help but lean over and kiss her red lips. Cheng Yaojia's eyes suddenly widened, and her face was full of disbelief. It should be known that the two of them were just outside the door, separated by only a door from Lu Guaning. Let me be alone, let's go. Lu Guaning's voice suddenly came from inside the room. When he heard that, he wanted to move, but he thought that his wife had run back to persuade him. Hearing her husband's voice, Cheng Yaojia anxiously pounded the chest of the man in front of her with her pink fists. Seeing that she was about to cry, Song Qing-shu let go of her. He didn't want their relationship to be exposed so quickly. That would be too boring. Young Master Lu, it's me. Song Qing-shu cleared his throat. The room suddenly fell into silence. After a long time, Lu Guaning's dry voice came. Prince Song, please come in. He could ignore his wife, but Song Qing-shu had saved his life and was also the world-famous Golden Snake King. No matter what, he couldn't afford to offend him. Song Qing-shu smiled at Cheng Yaojia. He pulled her hand and pushed the door open. Cheng Yaojia was so scared that she hastily pulled back her sleeves. After entering the room, he saw that Lu Guaning looked haggard. It was as if he had aged 20 years. Song Qing-shu secretly sighed. As a man, he could more or less understand Lu Guaning's current mood. Young Master Lu, I heard about your condition from the doctor. I hope you can get over it. When Song Qing-shu said this, Cheng Yaojia's heart warmed. Song Qing-shu obviously knew about it from her. If she told the truth, her husband would surely complain to her. This man was really considerate. Thinking of this, Cheng Yaojia became absent-minded for a moment. How can I get over this kind of thing? In any case, I am already a cripple. Young master, you don't need to waste your breath to comfort me. Lu Guaning said with a bitter smile. Song Qing-shu cursed in his heart. I am not related to you, so I don't want to pay attention to you. The reason why he spent so much effort on Lu Guaning and his wife was not because of Cheng Yaojia. Although Cheng Yaojia was lovely and moving, Song Qing-shu had always been surrounded by stunning beauties. How could he be so infatuated with a woman? Song Qing-shu patiently conquered Cheng Yaojia and got close to Lu Guaning mainly because of the name of the Shanin Lu family. Nowadays, there were many aristocratic families in the Southern Song dynasty. Although it was not as exaggerated as the Wei and Jin dynasties, Song Qing-shu's identity made him a commoner in the eyes of these aristocratic families. If he could get the help of the Shanin Lu family, it would be easier for him to gain a foothold in the Southern Song dynasty in the future. Of course, the Shanin Lu family was not a top aristocratic family. The entrance ticket he brought was not worth Song Qingshu spending so much effort. Song Qingshu was more interested in the Shanin Lu family's headquarters. Shanin was the Shaoxing of Song Qingshu's world. It was the gateway to the southeast of Hangzhou and was close to Hangzhou Bay. Hangzhou, which was the Lin and of this world, was the capital of the southern Song dynasty. It was heavily guarded, especially against the north and west. In the east, the Qiantang River was close to Hangzhou Bay. There were also elite naval forces stationed there. Overall, the only weak point was the defense against the south. Chapter 1083. Of course, this would only be carried out as a last resort. After all, the southern Song dynasty was now regarded by all the Han people in the world. If he rashly attacked, he was afraid that he would be spurned by all the Han people in the world. However, as the leader of the Golden Snake Battalion, who also aspired to rule the world, Song Qingshu had no choice but to prepare for a rainy day. The most important part of this plan was that it had to be fast, so before attacking, he had to ensure that Shaoxing City was under his control. Shaoxing, Shanin, was the headquarters of the Lu family. They had been operating here for nearly 100 years, and the family's power had already penetrated into every area of Shaoxing City. Controlling the Lu family was equivalent to controlling Shaoxing City. This was the main reason why Song Qingshu had spent so much time and energy on the Lu Guanyin couple. Song Qingshu gathered his thoughts, looked at Lu Guanyin, and comforted him. Young master, there is no need to belittle yourself and become a cripple. In the past, Sima Qian encountered a great disaster, but in the end, he completed the separation of Shi family. Kai Luan was in the palace, but he invented the paper-making technique, which will be remembered by all ages. Zheng, he went to the western seas 7 times, raising the prestige of the Chinese nation. Each of their experiences were worse than young masters, but they could also achieve immortality. Why is young master disheartened by a little setback? Lu Guanyin sighed. I understand this reasoning, but as a man, this kind of thing, how can I accept it? Seeing that his eyes were still lifeless, Song Qingshu knew that his consolation did not have any effect. Cheng Yaojia, who was beside him, also looked at him worriedly. The eagerness in her eyes showed how high her hopes were for him. After pondering for a moment, Song Qingshu suddenly said, as a man, love is only a small path. If you can do something earth-shattering and bring honor to your ancestors, then that is the right path. Why doesn't young master put your energy into your career? Career? Lu Guanyin smiled bitterly. I know myself. In terms of talent, I am only a mediocre person. In terms of martial arts, I am even less than average in Jianghu. What kind of career can I achieve? You can't say it like that. Song Qingshu smiled. I don't know if young master has heard of the Bishia swordplay manual? Evil warding sword manual? Lu Guanyin was shocked, and his eyes finally lit up. Legend has it that Lin Yuan II, a Fu Wei escort agency, used a set of 72 moves Bishia swordplay manual to become invincible. In recent years, various sects in the pugilistic world have been fighting for this set of swordplay manuals. How would I not know? However, this swordplay is only a legend. A few years ago, when the Fu Wei escort agency was exterminated, no one from the Lin family was seen using it. Therefore, many people doubt whether this swordplay manual really exists. Of course, this sword art exists. Song Qingshu smiled mysteriously. Why is young master so sure? Lu Guanying's heart skipped a beat as he looked up at him. Could it be? Yes, the Bishia swordplay is in my hands. Song Qingshu took out the kasaya from his robe and handed him the first page. Looking at the strange words Bishia swordplay manual on the kasaya, Lu Guanying's jaw dropped. It really is the Bishia swordplay manual. The kasaya looked like it had decades of history and could not be faked in such a short period of time. That's right. I can impart the Bishia sword manual to you. I hope that you will be able to pull yourself together and achieve great things in the future. Song Qingshu smiled. He had already glanced at the BCS sword manual before. Back then, Hong Qigong, Ouyang Feng, and the other four masters practiced the Nining manual for decades and often had new insights. However, Wang Chongyang had only looked at it for about 10 days and had mastered the Nining manual. Song Qingshu's current cultivation was not lower than Wang Chongyang's. In addition, with his special talent, he had already understood the BCS swordplay manual in a short period of time. Moreover, because the BCS swordplay manual was recorded by Lin Yuan-tu through his memories, it was more or less incomplete. There were many flaws in the BCS swordplay manual. These flaws disappeared in a flash. Even Ling Hu-chong, who had mastered martial arts in the original work, could not see them. However, Song Qingshu had the advantage of reading the BCS swordplay manual. In addition, his cultivation was higher. After reading it, he had already understood the BCS swordplay manual. Therefore, if anyone used the BCS swordplay manual against him in the future, it could only be said that they were courting death. Therefore, when he passed the BCS swordplay manual to Lu Guanyin, Song Qingshu was not worried that he would betray him in the future. Everything was under his control. Really? The BCS swordplay manual was a secret technique that countless people in Jianghu dreamed of. How could Lu Guanyin not be excited? Cheng Yaojia, who was beside him, was also shocked. She did not understand why Song Qingshu would give such an important manual to her husband. Could it be because of her? Thinking of this, Cheng Yaojia could not help but feel a little dazed. Of course it's true. Song Qingshu smiled, but Lu Guanyin was pleasantly surprised. He suddenly thought of his body's condition. Now I'm no longer a normal man. Won't practicing this technique affect me? There were many secret techniques in Jianghu that had very harsh requirements on the body's natural talent. Not to mention secret techniques. Even if a eunuch practiced ordinary martial arts, it would be very difficult because of his body's defects. This was also the reason why Lu Guanyin was so worried. Song Qingshu had a strange expression on his face. He unfolded the kasaya a little more and said, "I'm not sure about other martial arts, but this martial art can be said to be tailor-made for young master." Lu Guanyin and Cheng Yaojia were curious. They leaned over to take a look and saw that the first sentence was, "If you want to practice this technique, you must castrate yourself." They both cried out in surprise. Cheng Yaojia was embarrassed, but Lu Guanyin was pleasantly surprised. Lu Guanyin suddenly thought of something, and his expression became strange. Could it be that young master also? The BCS swordplay manual was a divine technique that all people in Jianghu yearned for. He did not believe that Song Qingshu could resist the temptation. Moreover, if Song Qingshu had not practiced it successfully, how could he be willing to pass it on to him? Cough, cough. Song Qingshu knew that he had misunderstood. He had no choice but to explain, "I have another technique, so I have never practiced this technique." As he said this, he subconsciously looked at Cheng Yaojia. Cheng Yaojia's heart skipped a beat when she saw his expression. She could not help but think of the other party's bravery when he galloped on top of her that night. Her body softened a little. She silently added in her heart, "He has never practiced this technique. I can testify." At this moment, Lu Guanyin was extremely excited. However, he was not an idiot. He knew that there was no free lunch in this world. He could not help but hesitate. "Young master, I just met. Why did you give me such a big gift?" Song Qingshu was originally admiring Cheng Yaojia's bashful demeanor. Hearing this, he withdrew his gaze and said with a smile, "These years young master Lu has been busy fighting against the Mongols and the Jin. He has not even taken care of his beautiful wife at home. Until now, he has not had any children. Song Mao admires his patriotism. Now that I am able to help young master, it is only a slight effort. Young master need not worry." Chapter 1084. Lu Guanyin was moved. He hurriedly got up and bowed. Then Guanyin will thank Prince Song in advance. "Young master, you don't have to be so polite. Rest and recuperate. Once your injuries are healed, I will teach you the BCS swordplay." Song Qingshu quickly reached out to support him. Lu Guiying nodded heavily, tears welling up in his eyes. His heart was filled with gratitude towards Song Qingshu. He secretly compared himself to Tang Kuobian and realized that the difference was like heaven and earth. I will go out first. Young master, rest well. Song Qingshu saw that it was about time and got up. I will go see him off. Cheng Yaojia also stood up. She didn't know why, but now that she was in the same room with her husband, she felt particularly depressed. Instead, she preferred to stay with Song Qingshu. See the young master off. Lu Guiying didn't think too much about it. Instead, he eagerly asked his wife to see him off. When they reached the courtyard, Song Qingshu suddenly stopped. He turned his head and looked at Cheng Yaojia with a faint smile. Why are you looking at me like that? Cheng Yaojia blushed slightly and turned her head away. I want to know what Madam is thinking. Song Qingshu walked to her side and chuckled. After what happened last time, Madam and young Master Lu's relationship is only in name. In addition to young Master Lu's divorce letter, Madam is now a free person. Why do you still want to stay by his side? I don't know. Cheng Yaojia looked at him blankly. Her lips moved slightly. We are husband and wife. Now that he has encountered such a situation, he needs help. How can I leave him at this time? Song Qingshu nodded. Madam is really kind-hearted. This is also good. Take care of him for a while. Once he gets used to it, you can make other plans. Cheng Yaojia nodded. However, a trace of sadness flashed in the depths of her eyes. The other party didn't take the initiative to promise her anything, so she naturally didn't say anything. When she thought of the fact that she had been married before and that such an experience meant that the two of them were destined to have no future, she couldn't help but feel a little sorry for herself. Song Qingshu was keenly aware of the change in her mood. He thought for a while and roughly guessed what she was thinking. He stepped forward and held her in his arms. If Foreign is willing, I will marry you in a sedan chair. Miss Cheng's heart warmed, but she angrily said, You already have a wife at home. Even if you want to take a concubine, how can you use 8 sedan bearers? Hearing this, Song Qingshu's heart was moved. Cheng Yaojia obviously didn't mind being a concubine. Foreign, you can rest assured. Whether it is a wife or a concubine, my Song family uses a large sedan chair. Moreover, the wives and concubines are treated equally. There is no distinction between them. Hearing his heartbeat, Cheng Yaojia could not stop her tears from flowing down. She did not know if she was moved or gratified. She wiped the tears on her face and pushed him away. Although her tears were flowing, there was a faint smile on her face. You can fool a little girl with such words. How can a wife and concubine not have a big or small difference? Humph, I'm not stupid. Why would I give up my position as the young madam of the Lu family and run over to be your concubine? Song Qingshu let out a deep sigh. It seems that I was overthinking things. Seeing the loneliness on his face, he turned around and was about to leave. Cheng Yaojia suddenly became anxious and pulled him back. Song Qingshu looked at her in astonishment. Cheng Yaojia's small face suddenly turned red. If I really abandon Guiying and follow you, it will not be good for your reputation or mine. Moreover, the Lu and Cheng families have been good friends for generations. My family will not agree to me leaving the Lu family. The corners of Song Qingshu's mouth slightly rose. He deliberately sighed again. It seems that you're still more willing to be Mrs. Lu. Cheng Yaojia anxiously stamped her small feet, and her breathing became rapid. Her plump chest trembled a few times as she said, Do you really want me to say it so clearly? With Guiying's current situation, he and I are only husband and wife in name. We are not husband and wife in reality. If you think about it in the future, I can quietly follow you. Song Qingshu saw that her earlobes were completely red. He knew that she was extremely shy. However, he liked her shyness. He could not help but deliberately moved closer to her ear and teased her. I wonder what Madam wants to do with me. Hateful. Cheng Yaojia could not hold on any longer. She pouted coquettishly and turned around to run away. Song Qingshu laughed loudly behind her. Song Qingshu returned to his room. A subordinate of the Golden Dragon Gang sent him a message. Li Kexio wanted to see him. Strange. Why does he want to see me so soon? Song Qingshu was lost in thought. He could not help but be curious. After all, they had parted on bad terms not long ago. There was no reason for the other party to come to see him so soon. Could it be that he was willing to give in and no longer care about his daughter's position as empress? With this kind of curiosity, Song Qingshu once again saw Li Kashio. The place where the two sides met this time was on a gaily painted boat on the river. Song Qingshu was skilled and bold, so he was not afraid of any ambush from the other side. He calmly sat down in front of Li Kashio. "Nephew, you really have a good bearing." Li Kashio revealed a strange expression. Song Qingshu smiled and said, "Uncle Li also has an extraordinary bearing." Both of them looked at each other and burst into laughter. Both of them understood the meaning of each other's words. Li Kashio admired Song Qingshu for coming alone. Song Qingshu admired Li Kashio for daring to be so close to him. After all, with Song Qingshu's current cultivation, even if Li Kashio had 100,000 elite soldiers, they would not be able to save his life at such a close distance. I was indeed a bit angry during the day. However, after I came back, I carefully thought about it and found that what you said was not unreasonable. Li Kashio poured a cup of tea for Song Qingshu. She then said, "This time, I specifically called you over to avoid any unexpected events. I want to tell nephew that I have already thought it through and am willing to cooperate with nephew. The position of imperial concubine is not an injustice to UNG." "Really?" Song Qingshu's eyes widened in disbelief. He could wear out iron shoes in fruitless search, but by chance he found it effortlessly. However, this happiness came too quickly. It was somewhat unreal. "Of course it is true." Li Kashio then changed the topic. "However, there is one matter that I need to trouble nephew with." Song Qingshu smiled and said, "Uncle Li, please speak. Not to mention one. Even if it was 10 or 100, I would not even frown." Li Kashio shook her head and looked at him meaningfully. "Nephew should not speak too early. This matter is not so easy to accomplish." Song Qingshu lightly said, "If it was something easy to accomplish, why would Uncle Li open your mouth to find me? Nephew indeed has a good bearing." Li Kashio gave a thumbs up. She then continued, "You also know that Yangzhou is currently at the mouth of the wind and waves. All the forces are staring at this fat meat. If I choose the Golden Snake Camp, I will definitely offend a few other forces. Let's not talk about Jin and Qing. Nephew previously said that he could help settle them. I believe in nephew's ability. Although Mongolia is strong, it is after all too far away. It is beyond their reach. I'm also not worried. However, I've always been very close to the Southern Song. They have always viewed me as something in their pocket. If they find out that the cooked duck has flown away, they will definitely fly into a rage out of humiliation." Song Qingshu nodded. This was also the question that he had been thinking about. Chapter 1085. Song Qingshu looked at her playfully and said, "Uncle Li, you must have come up with a plan." Li Kashio blushed and said with an embarrassed smile, "Nephew, you are really insightful. I was thinking that since Han Xingzhou and his people have fallen into the hands of the Mongols, it is a golden opportunity. If we can rescue them, we can do them a big favor and take the opportunity to sign a non-aggression agreement with them. In the future, when they return to the Southern Song, they will naturally be too embarrassed to attack us." "Really?" Song Qingshu tapped his fingers on the table. His biggest enemy had always been the Mongols, and it was not wise to start a war with the Southern Song at this stage. Not only would he waste his strength, but he would also lose the support of the Han people. "Okay, we will do Han Xingzhou a favor." After thinking for a while, Song Qingshu came up with a plan. In fact, even if Li Kashio didn't say it, he would still save Han Xingzhou. On the surface, Han Xingzhou was a firm warmonger in the Southern Song. After saving him and returning to the Southern Song, it was very likely that he would attack the Jin Kingdom. Now that the Jin Kingdom was under Song Qingshu's control, it was not a wise choice. Unfortunately, it was not so simple. In the Southern Song, 3 powerful ministers were fighting each other. Han Xingzhou was the most powerful, and Jia Sherdao and Shermi Yuan were the second. The two had to unite to fight against Han Xingzhou. Now, the situation in the southern Song court had reached a delicate balance. Han Xingzhou wanted to attack the north, and besides the Jin kingdom, Jia Shidao and Shermi Yuan were the least willing to see him succeed. If he succeeded, Han Xingzhou's prestige would soar, and they would not be able to fight against him. Therefore, once Han Xingzhou attacked the north, Jia Shidao and Shermi Yuan would definitely try to stop him. In history, one of the main reasons why Han Xingzhou's northern expedition failed was because of his political enemies. In this chaotic world, Han Xingzhou's political enemies had become the two most famous and ruthless figures in history. The problems he would encounter would be 10 times more difficult than the northern expedition in real history. Considering all the information, Song Qingshu was very sure that once Han Xingzhou started the northern expedition, even if he didn't do anything, Jia Shidao and Shermi Yuan would take care of him. Therefore, although Han Xuanzhou's northern expedition seemed intimidating, it was nothing to worry about. More importantly, Song Qingshu could take advantage of this opportunity to gain complete control of the Jin Kingdom's army. Although Tang Quebian was the highest commander of the Jin Kingdom in name, he had risen too fast, which inevitably led to an unstable foundation. A large part of the military was controlled by Taizong's family and several big families. Once Han Xingzhou started the northern expedition, he could take over the army. During the war, it would be much easier for him to promote his trusted subordinates and eliminate his political enemies. Of course, Song Qingshu had another consideration. The southern Song dynasty was the most advantageous situation for him. If Han Xingzhou died in Yangzhou, it would be easy for Jia Shidao to dominate. In history, Jia Shidao had controlled the military and financial power of the southern Song dynasty. If there was a chance in this world, Jia Shidao would still control all the power. It was not good for Song Qingshu that the southern Song dynasty was the most powerful. So, after thinking about it, he finally found that saving Han Xingzhou was the most advantageous thing for him. This was why he had agreed to help Cheng Yaojia and Lu Guining save Han Xingzhou. It was not because he was blinded by lust, but because he had secretly decided to save Han Xingzhou. Cheng Yaojia had come to ask him for help, so why not? Seeing that Song Qingshu had agreed to save Han Xingzhou, Li Kaxiu was overjoyed. The two of them spent the rest of the time discussing how to save Han Xingzhou. When he returned to the stronghold of the Golden Dragon Gang, he found Lu Guining pacing back and forth in front of his room. He could not help but laugh. Perhaps he was afraid that he would not give him the Bishias swordplay when he returned. "Young Master Lu, why did you come to me so late at night?" Song Qingshu looked around. He was surprised that Cheng Yaojia was not there. "I have something to ask of you, young master." Lu Guining hesitated. "Come in and talk." Song Qingshu opened the door, but he did not care. Lu Guining had come to him for nothing more than the Bishias swordplay, or to help save Han Xingzhou. After entering the room, Lu Guining was obviously nervous. He opened his mouth several times, but he did not say a word. Song Qingshu smiled and said, "Young Master Lu, you do not need to stand on ceremony. If you have any difficulties, just say it. As long as Song Mao can do it, I will do it without hesitation. Young Master can definitely do it, but I am afraid that you are not willing." Lu Guining's eyes flickered. It was obvious that he was very hesitant. "Oh, tell me about it." Song Qingshu was also curious. Lu Guining took a deep breath as if he had made a great decision. He asked, "What does young master think of Cheng Yaojia?" Song Qingshu frowned. He did not understand why Lu Guining would suddenly mention his wife. He could only nod and say, "Madame Lu is as beautiful as a flower and as gentle as the moon. She is a rare good wife. Young Master Lu is very lucky." "Yes." Lu Guining smiled bitterly. "It is a pity that something like this has happened to me. I am afraid that I will be a burden to her for the rest of her life." Song Qingshu's face darkened. He thought that he was about to become a street office Annie. Why did he have to comfort this couple all day long? However, the Lu family will be of great use in the future. He could only be patient and said, Young master, why do you say such things? Even after such a thing has happened, Madame Lu has not abandoned you. She is clearly not the kind of person who is afraid that you will be a burden to her. She is indeed very good. Lu Guanyin sighed. That is why I feel even more sorry for her. As her husband, I will not be able to support her for the rest of her life. That is why I want to give her a son so that she will have something to look forward to in the future. What is so difficult about that? You can. Song Qingshu's eyes suddenly widened. He finally reacted. What did Lu Guanyin mean? He was clearly unable to have sex with her. How could he give Qing Yaojia a son? Lu Guanyin saw his expression and knew what he was thinking. He could not help but smile bitterly. Young master, you do not know. Actually, even if this had not happened, I may not have been able to give her a son. Song Qingshu frowned and asked, why is that? I have been married to Qing Yaojia for many years. These years, her stomach has not moved. That is why the people in the clan often point fingers at her behind her back. However, I have privately found a doctor to diagnose her. The problem is most likely with me. Originally, Lu Guanyin would definitely not speak of such a shameful matter to outsiders. However, now that an even more serious matter had occurred, this matter was no longer important. Song Qingshu immediately felt relieved. This was no wonder. In the original work, Lu Guanyin was a good young man. After interacting with him for this period of time, he had become somewhat despicable and wretched. So it was because of this matter. After all, for a man, not being able to have children was truly a great nightmare. Under this kind of pressure year after year, even a bright personality would inevitably become somewhat distorted. It is useless for young man or Master Lu to tell me this. I'm not a doctor and cannot help you. Song Qingshu had a faint guess in his heart. However, he immediately threw this thought to the back of his mind. After all, it was too absurd. How could it be possible? Of course, young master can help me. Lu Guanyin immediately became excited. Song Qingshu was dumbfounded. How could he help with this kind of matter? Chapter 1086. If there was a mirror, Song Qingshu knew that his current expression would be one of stupefaction. He really hadn't expected this. I know that this request is very difficult for young master, but I have no other choice. Tears glistened in Lu Guanyin's eyes. When I was healthy, I couldn't get her pregnant. Now it's even more impossible. Song Qingshu was silent as he listened to him continue. We're not young anymore. A few years ago, we could still find some random excuse to get by. But now, if we don't have any children, we'll be criticized by the people in our families. Also, for a family like ours, not having a child is a very terrible thing. At that time, no matter if it is resources or help, we will not be provided to the bloodline that is destined to be extinct. We may not be able to establish ourselves in the family. Can't you just find someone to adopt a son? Song Qingshu frowned. But that child has nothing to do with us. If young master is willing, at least it will be Yao Jia's child. Seeing Song Qingshu frown, Lu Guanyin quickly said, to be honest, if it weren't for this, I wouldn't be so magnanimous to let my wife. Yao Jia has already sacrificed enough for me. I cannot be so selfish. After thinking about it, the only way I can repay her kindness is to make her pregnant with my own flesh and blood. Lu Guanyin spoke with an expression of deep emotion. His body seemed to emit a holy light. However, there are still some things that he did not say. The reason why he made such a decision was firstly to cover up the fact that his body had such a defect. For a man, it was too embarrassing. Originally, there were many people in the family who were secretly talking about him and his wife. If their injuries were to be exposed, what would happen? If he had a child, he would be able to shut up people's mouths and completely pull his wife to his side. Although Qing Yaojia didn't show any disgust, people's hearts could change. In a few years, what if she couldn't stand this kind of life anymore? Having a child would solve all problems. Secondly, he wanted to ride on Song Qingshu's coattails. Song Qingshu had saved him and his wife's lives, and he had even promised to pass him the Bixia swordplay that countless people dreamed of. Everything seemed so unreal, and Lu Guanyin was always uncertain, afraid that he would wake up from his dream. If he could facilitate the marriage between the other party and his wife, he would be much more confident. Third, he wanted to save Han Yuezhou, but Song Qing-shu had already treated him very well. He had nothing to repay, so how could he ask for help? If the other party had such a relationship with his wife, then they would be considered a family, and it would be much more convenient to speak. As the saying goes, everything is difficult at the beginning. If he had not given Cheng Yaojia to Tang Quobian, Lu Guaning would not have made such a decision. He was like a red-eye gambler. He had already lost so much, he had to seize every opportunity to make a comeback. Fourth, it was for the future status of the family. After all, he had worked so hard and even sacrificed his wife's innocence to save Han Yuezhou. Han Yuezhou would certainly repay this kindness. But if he had no children, it would benefit others in the family. This was something he absolutely could not accept. Of course, there was also his gratitude to Song Qing-shu and his guilt toward his wife. All these factors intertwined, and Lu Guaning made such a shocking decision. Seeing Lu Guaning's earnest eyes, Song Qing-shu suddenly felt a headache coming on. How can I agree to this kind of thing? Although he had already stolen Cheng Yaojia's body and mind, Lu Guaning's request felt strange. Lu Guaning smiled bitterly and said, I know this kind of thing is very difficult for you, but I hope you can understand our current difficulties. We really have no other choice but to come up with this plan. We? Song Qing-shu had a strange expression on his face. Did your wife agree? Lu Guaning suddenly stammered. At first she didn't agree, but after I analyzed the pros and cons with her, she agreed. She agreed? Song Qing-shu did not have too many doubts. After all, the two of them had already been intimate, so it was not surprising that Cheng Yaojia agreed. Seeing that Song Qing-shu still had a hesitant expression, Lu Guaning had to continue to increase the price. You can rest assured that no outsider will know about this matter. From now on, Cheng Yaojia and I will only pretend to be husband and wife in front of outsiders. In private, you can look for her at any time. Even if Cheng Yaojia becomes pregnant and has children in the future, if you don't mind, you can still look for her. I won't say anything. That works? Song Qing-shu's eyes widened. To be honest, this condition was too generous. He did not need to perform any obligations and enjoyed all the rights. His only obligation was to make Cheng Yaojia pregnant, if that counted as an obligation. Lu Guaning sighed and said, We can't repay you for your kindness in this lifetime, so I also want to use this matter to repay you. Song Qing-shu's expression turned serious and hurriedly interrupted him, saying, I am helping you because of Jianghu morality. I do not have any ulterior motives, and I do not need this kind of repayment. Lu Guaning hurriedly explained, I know that you are a person of noble character and unquestionable integrity. Right now, we are in urgent need of your help, not to repay you. Song Qing-shu revealed an awkward expression. After a long time, he said bitterly, All right, I only hope that young Master Lu will not resent me in the future. He did not agree because he was greedy for Cheng Yaojia. After all, he already had Cheng Yaojia. The reason why he agreed was because of the Hangzhou Bay landing plan. If he wanted to control the Lu family, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Seeing that the other party had finally agreed, Lu Guaning was overjoyed. Young master, you worry too much. I am grateful that you agreed to help me. So how can I resent you? Young master, this way please, huh? Song Qing-shu was startled. Please what? Lu Guaning's expression was also a bit awkward. My wife is waiting for you in the room. Starting tonight? Song Qing-shu sucked in a breath of cold air. This husband was really free and easy. I'm afraid we won't be staying in Yangzhou for long, so we naturally have to hurry. Lu Guaning smiled embarrassedly and then said, Young master, Cheng Yaojia's temperament is a bit shy, and this kind of thing is too embarrassing. When we get to her room later, she may be too embarrassed to answer you. You don't have to worry so much, just... In the end, he could not say the rest of the words. Thinking about how he would once again push his wife into the arms of another man, Lu Guaning's heart suddenly ached. However, his eyes quickly became firm again. For the current him, there was no meaning to love. Only martial arts and power were the meaning of the rest of his life. Chapter 1087. Lu Guiying led Song Qingshu to the door of his wife's room and said, "Go in, young master. I won't show myself, lest it becomes awkward later. Actually, Brother Lu, it's not too late to regret." Song Qingshu changed the way he addressed him. After all, Lu Guiying was older and he was his brother, so he deserved to be called Brother Lu. Noticing the change in the way he addressed Song Qingshu, Lu Guiying was elated. He felt much closer to Song Qingshu and hurriedly said, "Don't worry, young master. This decision was made after careful consideration. We will not go back on our word." Then, all right. At this point, Song Qingshu had nothing more to say. Just as he was about to push the door open, he suddenly stopped and handed a thin booklet to Lu Guiying. "This is a copy of the BCS swordplay manual. You can study it when you have time." Song Qingshu had always been kind. Since Lu Guiying had given his wife to him, he couldn't let him go back empty-handed. Plus, he had planned to give him the BCS swordplay anyway. Thank you." Lu Guiying's voice was trembling. His hand that reached out to take the booklet was also trembling. He was obviously very excited. In addition to relying on Song Qingshu, half of his future career would depend on this peerless martial arts manual in front of him. Watching Song Qingshu walk into his wife's room and close the door behind him, Lu Guiying opened his mouth, but in the end, he didn't say anything. As a man, making such a decision was not an easy thing to do. However, looking at the secret manual in his hand that everyone in Jianghu dreamed of, his spirit recovered. Taking a deep look at his wife's room, Lu Guiying gritted his teeth and left in a hurry. He didn't want to stay there. If he heard the sound coming from inside, he wouldn't be able to bear that kind of torment. Plus, he needed a quiet place to study the BCS swordplay, so he left without any reluctance. Hearing that Lu Guiying had left, Song Qingshu walked into the house. He didn't know why there was no light in the room, but when he thought about what Lu Guiying said about his wife being shy, he suddenly understood. Cheng Yaojia usually looks as pure as a little white rabbit. I didn't expect her acting to be so real. Song Qingshu couldn't help laughing. Miss Cheng did not come out to greet him. Instead, she lay quietly on the bed in the inner room. Her body was covered with a quilt. Her chest rose and fell slightly, and her breathing was very calm. Asleep? Song Qingshu was startled, but it was indeed a little late. It was normal for her to fall asleep after waiting here for a while. After all, in Lu Guiying's opinion, this night must have been very stressful for his wife. However, in reality, the two of them were already in perfect harmony. Cheng Yaojia was no longer on guard against him. Even if she fell asleep, she wasn't afraid that he would do anything to her. Sleeping is also good. Song Qingshu did not wake up the beauty on the bed. Instead, he felt that it would be more interesting to try a different scene. He quietly took off his coat and clothes. Song Qingshu quietly crawled under the quilt on the bed. The key to this situation was to steal. If he woke her up, it would be bad. As soon as he crawled under the quilt, Song Qingshu's hand felt soft and smooth like cream. The beauty on the bed seemed to only be wearing the most intimate layer of underwear. Song Qingshu secretly laughed. Usually, Miss Cheng is so dignified and quiet. Now, she actually came to wait for me naked. It seems that Lu Guiying's decision broke her heart, so she simply let go of herself. A beauty's feelings were heavy. Song Qingshu naturally couldn't disappoint her good intentions. He reached out to hold her fragrant shoulder and gently kissed her. Ah, the beauty under him moaned. It seemed that she had already sensed it. Song Qingshu felt the woman under him tightly clenched her teeth. He couldn't help but laugh. We are already an old couple. Why are you still shy? He didn't know if the beauty was moved by his words or if she really couldn't resist his various superb attacks. Her red lips parted slightly, and in the end, he kissed her deeply. The other party's kissing technique was rusty. It was obvious that she was dodging. Song Qingshu didn't care. He only thought that she was thinking that her husband was still in the garden and couldn't let go of his hands and feet. So, he used all kinds of flirting methods and kissed her until she was gasping for breath and her heart was beating fast. Hey, Madam seems to have lost weight these past 2 days. Song Qing-shu felt that her skin was not as plump and soft as before. It seemed to be more compact and slender. Woo-woo, Miss Chung seemed to want to say something. However, when she opened her mouth, she only made some sweet humming sounds. Instead, it added fuel to the fire, causing Song Qing-shu's hot kisses to fall like raindrops. Your legs also seemed to have become longer. Song Qing-shu couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. It seems that fumbling in the dark has its own advantages. In the dark, skin and skin rubbed against each other. Song Qing-shu's whole body was burning hot. He estimated that the time was right and leaned over. Hey, Song Qing-shu felt as if he was tightly bound by something. He couldn't move forward. He wondered why Miss Cheng's body was still like that of a young girl. Feeling her body tremble slightly, Song Qing-shu moved closer to her ear and gently said, "It's not our first time. Why is Madam so nervous?" Miss Chung hummed again. Unfortunately, in Song Qing-shu's ears, it was only an affectionate invitation. Song Qing-shu straightened his waist, and his whole body sank down. His whole body suddenly froze because he keenly felt that he seemed to have broken through a thin layer. As a veteran in the field of love, how could he not know what was going on? Miss Chung had been someone's wife for many years, and they had skin contact before. How could she still be a virgin? Song Qing-shu's face was ashen. He lifted the curtains and shot his solitary yang finger force at the oil lamp on the table. The solitary yang finger force was extremely firm and yang. When it rubbed against the wick of the oil lamp, sparks immediately appeared and the room gradually lit up. Lowering his head to look, Song Qing-shu was stunned. Yellow Nancian was lying under him, her face streaked with tears, looking at him pitifully. "Oh, why is it you?" Song Qing-shu was dumbfounded. His first thought was that Lu Guining had set up a trap and was planning to assassinate him. He hurriedly looked around, but he couldn't find anything unusual within a radius of several dozen feet. Woo-woo, Yellow Nancian let out that kind of whimpering sound again. Song Qing-shu finally understood that her mute acupoint had been sealed. No wonder she had been whimpering several times before. He thought she was too embarrassed to speak and deliberately pretended to be half asleep. As soon as Yellow Nancian's acupoint was unsealed, she said in a sobbing voice, "Quickly, go away, ah." Only then did Song Qing-shu realize that he was still in her body. He couldn't help but smile awkwardly. Looking at the young girl's tear-stained face, even if he had a heart of stone, he would still be able to soften it. "Okay, I'll come out immediately." Song Qing-shu was a bit flustered. Objectively speaking, he had already been through thousands of flowers and not a single leaf had touched his body. Normally, he was always calm and collected, and it was very rare for him to lose his composure like this. However, the current situation was too unimaginable. In addition, he had taken advantage of her, so he couldn't help but feel a bit guilty. Chapter 1088. Song Qing-shu had a strange expression on his face. He could only maintain his previous position, afraid that he would make this tear-stained beauty cry again. However, their current position was too ambiguous. For Song Qing-shu, it was a great torment. In order to divert their attention and resolve the awkwardness, Song Qing-shu hurriedly asked, "Nancian, sister, why are you here?" He had originally planned to call her Miss Yelu or Miss Nancian, but since he had just bullied her, it would be too distant. So, he changed it to Nancian's sister instead. Yelu Nancian's attention was not on this at all, nor did she notice the change in the way she addressed him. She angrily said, "Isn't it all because of that Madam Lu you speak of, Chung Yaojia?" Song Qing-shu's face was full of disbelief. How could it be? Chung Yaojia had always been shy and bashful in his heart. He really could not imagine that this was her doing. How could it not be? Yelu Nancian angrily said, "I was resting in my room when she suddenly ran in. Without saying anything, she sealed my acupuncture points and brought me to this room. Then she took off my clothes and put me on the bed. Not long after you came, this is really a misunderstanding. I thought that the person in the room was. Song Qingshu's face was full of embarrassment. He did not know how to explain the whole thing. I thought it was Madame Lu. Yilu Nancian sneered. One of you is a married woman, and the other is a married man. You two hooked up in private. You really are an adulterous couple. Song Qingshu was unhappy. We are in love with each other. How is it as dirty as you think? Moreover, young Master Lu also knows about our matter. He was the one who asked me to come here tonight. Keep making things up. Yilu Nancian did not believe him at all. What husband would let another man into his wife's room? Come to think of it, this has something to do with you father and daughter. Song Qingshu laughed bitterly and roughly explained the whole story. Hearing that Lu Guaning could no longer have sex, Yilu Nancian was finally moved. No wonder Madame Lu wanted to do this to me. So it was to avenge her husband. Seeing her nibbling her red lips as she spoke, Song Qingshu felt that it was exceptionally alluring. The change in his heart quickly reflected on his body. Yilu Nancian cried out in shock, her body involuntarily trembling. Song Qingshu could feel it even more clearly. He realized that as she trembled, he sank deeper and deeper. Yilu Nancian angrily stared with tears in her eyes. Song Qingshu's face was filled with anger. Yilu Nancian cried out. Her body arched like a bow. Her body turned soft. Her. Yilu Nancian face. Yilu Qingshian's eyes. Her face. Song Qingshu face. Yilu. Yilu Yang felt as if he had a Lu, and on, Yilu not knowing how much time had passed. In a day she saw Song Qingshu's handsome face dripping with sweat. A strange feeling welled up in Yilu Nancian's heart. She couldn't stop herself from hooking her arms around his neck. Song Qingshu finally woke up. Looking at the red marks on her body, he felt extremely guilty. Sister Nancian, before he could finish, Yilu Nancian coldly cut him off. Get out. What happened tonight was my fault. I will take responsibility for it. Song Qingshu continued. Get out. Yilu Nancian picked up the clothes beside her and silently put them on, her face still as cold as ice. Song Qingshu knew that she had suffered a great shock today. It was useless no matter what he said. He could only wait for her to calm down and then slowly explain to her. Then you rest first. I won't disturb you any longer. Seeing that she didn't respond at all, Song Qingshu smiled bitterly and left the room, closing the door behind him. Taking a stroll in the garden, Song Qingshu was filled with regret. He and Yilu Nancian originally admired each other, and even had a feeling that the friendship between gentlemen was as indifferent as water. In the end, what happened tonight completely destroyed their friendship. Although he thought of himself as charismatic, the time he spent with Yilu Nancian was too short. It wasn't enough to win her heart. How could she willingly give herself to him? But what could he have done in that situation? Would he have listened to her and left, put on his clothes, and returned to his own home? That would have been extremely awkward. Rather than that, it would have been better to leave an unforgettable impression in her heart. The night is cold, and the stars are sparse. Young master, why aren't you accompanying a beautiful woman in a warm and gentle place? Why are you sighing alone in the yard? Not far away, a delicate female voice came. When Song Qingshu heard this voice, he was instantly enraged, and with a single step, he appeared beside her. He pushed her down and fiercely slapped her plump and supple, but as she cried out in surprise. After a dozen slaps, the evil fire in Song Qingshu's heart gradually subsided. He fiercely glared at her. Isn't it all because of you? Cheng Yaojia was in so much pain that tears welled up in her eyes. She covered her buttocks and stood up. Who told her father to do that? To Guaning. Song Qingshu gloomily snorted. Her father is her father. She is her. Every debt has a debtor. It's not like she hurt young Master Lu. Why are you looking for her? It's only right and proper for a son to pay his father's debts. Cheng Yaojia bit her lips. Her usual bashfulness was gone, and her expression became extremely stubborn. Song Qingshu looked at her in surprise and said, I didn't expect you to have such deep feelings for young Master Lu. It's not what you think. Cheng Yaojia hurriedly waved her hand and explained, "Actually, I still have some feelings for Guanyin." After, she raised her head and looked around. Seeing that there was no one around, she said in a low voice, "After all, I did something wrong to him. But this time, when I heard that he gave me to you, my last feelings of guilt disappeared. I've thought it through now. In the future, I'll be at ease." Cheng Yaojia raised her head and looked at Song Qingshu. She immediately lowered her head, and a trace of shyness appeared on her cheeks. "In order to be at ease as your lover in the future, I'll do one last thing for Guanyin. I'll also put an end to our many years of love as husband and wife." After Song Qingshu heard this, he couldn't help but sigh. "It's a pity that Yelun Nanxian has suffered. Who said it was hard on her?" Cheng Yaojia snorted. "In the future, she will understand how lucky it is for a woman to be able to have sex with a man like you." Song Qingshu suppressed the smile on his face and deliberately said with a straight face, "Do you think I won't pursue this matter because you flatter me?" You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.